they planned this under cover of the darkness. And the lobbyists from the traditional companies were people were contacting me and said, we don't even, they won't even let us in the door.
I'm
The
glad you
old
brought this up.
behavior
I
is
brought this
gone.
up yesterday. The most powerful lobbyists on K Street at those law firms are the lobbyists for the defense contractors. And what you just said is correct. So we discussed the younger man who has a company who's got the AI for drones yesterday, and there was somebody on the call that d- brought this up. Is he on the call today?
Yeah, that was me, Palmer Luckey, and his
I feel like we're in a
magnificent
12
drone.
step meeting right now. You have to
No.
admit
So
where it came from.
why don't you talk about what you talked about yesterday?
No, I was just what the point I brought up yesterday was that we do need some innovation in the DoD and get some of these companies like Palmer Luckey's company with his drones because the DoD needs to focus on maximum lethality and warfare is evolving and we can lower defense costs and increase our lethality at the same time if we start integrating some of these new warfare measures into the DoD. Like that's a win-win for the military and it's a win for the American people as taxpayers if we're spending, if we cut the defense budget by 25% because we have these lethal drones that, in theory, down the road, a swarm of drones that costs $2 million going up against uh, F-15 because the swarm of drones can take out an airplane and you lose, as far as value, you lose less money using the drones to destroy it. I mean, that's like, I think if anyone saw Guardians of the Galaxy 2, there's a scene where like the ship's fighting against a swarm of drones and it's just drones and there's people on the back end. It's just a funny scene, but like that's what could eventually happen. You have these swarms of drones taking out these, but like the military still needs like missiles, artillery, aircraft, troops on the ground, but we just need to integrate this new technology because it'll lower defense costs and raise lethality of the military. So,
So the generals at the Pentagon have testified in front of Congress, and everyone agrees that the DoD budget is going to be going over $1 trillion in fiscal year 25-26, which starts on October 1st, 2025. So our DoD budget will become over $1 trillion. So
Can I interrupt for a second on
what
that?
you're talking about is that's a great idealistic idea, but the DoD budget is never going to be cut by 25%. Okay?
But let me
Not going to
interrupt
happen.
you. I need you to read that executive order.
I
Previous
did.
previous to this executive order, you were not in a Nunn-McCurdy breach until you were 25% over or whatever the
Right.
metrics were. In this order, it says the current Secretary of Defense gets to prioritize the if I'm not sure the MDAPs, whatever the acronym is for the high, it says if you are in breach in a current program of 15%, they can cancel you and put the money towards their primary objective. That's a 10%er right there. And
Right.
these companies that go and there are people on this call that know you go to 24% 0.5 on that breach so that you don't get Nunn-McCurdy'd. And for me, it's important because I was in the military. I'm sure a bunch of you guys were. I've picked up bodies at Dover and they're feeling crap that never gets used because it doesn't work. So there. And if they can, it makes me crazy. So I'm just very happy that this executive order came out and there's no way anybody in Washington, D.C. wrote that order. That came from the West Coast.
In the queue, we have Pharrell and then Joshua Johnson.
Okay, and I'll shut up. Anyway, read that, people, and cogitate on it because it's going to have big impact on our country's ability to defend and offend.
That was gonna be my question. Is that where JD Vance being
Oh,
kind
yes. Look at JD Vance.
involved?
Oh, yeah.
Look at JD Vance. Look at Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Navy, Secretary of the Air Force, the new OSD staff. They all come from Silicon Valley, or a lot of them were previously military,
Yes.
maybe 30 to 40. They got fielded crappy stuff that didn't work. And
Yeah.
now they're all in the West Coast, right, wrong, or indifferent. And I love it. And I'm a boomer / Army veteran from the 80s, and I love it. And a defense. So I'm done.
Joshua?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, there's a big problem with the inefficiency of military spending that we've got to get a hold of. I don't know if that's going to result in, I don't know if that'll result in like DoD cuts. Probably not. It'll probably just result in just, I don't know, like, just better spending of the same budget. But it's almost like that in the DoD, it's almost like we're putting a VAT on ourselves, right? Like the EU has a value added tax for every element of production. I mean, that's how we get those $1,000 screws that everybody likes to talk about, right? I mean, I remember when I was, junior enlisted, I was, fielding some crap that was I mean, it was ridiculous. Mike Shaw, I don't know. I feel like you were in the military based on your your avatar picture when you're not around. But like, does anybody remember a product in like circa 2008 called Quiet Pro?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
where
Yep.
they expected
hearing protection and all that
Yes.
stuff. Yep, I remember that. Yeah.
It's like it was this ridiculous ass system where, junior enlisted were expected to stick these things down into our ear canals for comms, and they were the most uncomfortable things in the world. First thing we would do would just yank those things out. That was ridiculous. Who thinks about these things? Anyway,
Me.
sort of
I do.
beside the point. And I'm also in Norfolk, right? So I'm calling from Norfolk, Virginia. I mean, you can't spit down here without hitting a military contractor or a tester, R&D, things like that. So man, but I don't know how to look. The contractors are gonna charge, and they're gonna produce, as Kathy said, to their price point, right? So that they're not in material breach of the contract. Like that's what they're gonna do. In every industry. So I don't know how we bring down costs though.
Oh,
Honestly, I don't know. It certainly doesn't seem like it certainly doesn't seem like the outsourcing that we currently do brings costs down at all.
well, this is my response to that. That order that came out 2 nights ago directs them to use commercially developed, dual use technology, i.e., things that have been developed on a company's dime that can be hardened for military use. They've got the laws, they've got everything. Even freaking John Cornyn, my senator, put a bill in about 4 months ago and nobody paid that we're gonna, and this, sorry for this wonkiness, let's combatant commanders use modernization funds when they go to deploy. Before it's always been, here, take this and it doesn't work and we wish you luck. These guys are getting access to buy stuff that works. It's amazing.
Oh, okay. All right.
You're talking
Yeah.
about
Okay. That makes
COTS?
perfect sense. That makes
It's a
perfect sense.
well-coordinated attack that's been going on. I think they regrouped after the last administration changed.
Okay. Yeah, that
It's
makes
really-
perfect sense.
I'm
Man, I
sorry,
remember.
this is like my favorite topic.
Yeah, it looked like I remember in the surge we were, everybody, not just like, spec war folks, but like everybody was trying to get, you know, aftermarket gear and bring it with them, right? Like
Mhm.
whether it was something as silly as Oakley boots instead of Bates or, you know, whatever we were being issued, right? We were always trying to get, you know, to bring different gear. So
Anyway,
hey, that's
yeah.
that makes a lot of sense to me.
This is my favorite topic, so
That
I'm-
God, you're
generation-
bringing
gotta
me
have
back.
like a group
That
of
Generation
women.
Kill had
That-
a lot of those kind of type effed up
Yes.
scenes. Like for the most part, or you have some stupid jackass E8, E9 coming through and being like, "Where are your boots? The wrong, you know."
I was a contractor over there, you know, trying to give you
roll
stuff
your
you didn't
blouse up.
want.
Yeah, okay, bud,
Tell
whatever.
me about it, Mike. Tell me about it, Mike. Mike Gunny over there walking around in boots and utes with his Oakley boots while everybody else was told not to bring Oakley boots. I
Yeah,
mean, come
yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Come
we're
on.
here to save the world. Sorry, I got us on a
Raleigh's going to help
topic
us. Raleigh
people are
has
very, you know, passionate.
National Guard and the Marines for the people that are not don't know about this. I don't know if it's is nowadays because I haven't served in the Marines ever, but in the National Guard, 5 years ago when I was in, so it's been some time. Like the National Guard and the Marines perennially always get the shit into the stick
Oh,
for
of
the
course.
thing that's been stretched out. Now, I will say the war on terror, the way we fought that, the global war on terror, we fought that massively different to like where we actually took reserve and National Guard components and put them up on a little bit higher thing. So they got better equipment and some of that. But that was only during the war. And if that was if your unit was in rotation, it blah, 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 you know, if you were being deployed or whatever. But anyway,
Mhm.
yeah.
Raleigh?
Yeah, no, that was an interesting conversation about the military. But I was just wondering if like y'all heard the discussions about the next Democratic nominee, and some people were putting out some different names, and I keep hearing Andy Bashir because I guess he's like the one Democratic governor of not even a southern state, but to New Yorkers, I guess they consider that a southern state. And like I never heard of Andy. Well, I guess I've heard of him, but I would say his name recognition in the country is less than 10%.
Less
James
than
has
that.
something to say.
Yeah,
That can change pretty quickly during the course of the campaign, though. Like once, if the Democrat Party chose to get behind him, they would. I mean, that his name recognition would change.
it
I mean, he's
would,
not a
but my
celebrity.
point
but-
is that he's not gaining traction on his own. Yeah, of course, if they threw $2.5 billion at it, and you know everybody, every major institution, every major elite institution got behind it, yeah, his profile would raise. But just on his own, he's not getting a lot of traction. And like my point is, you know, that they poured a lot of money into Harris. They spent 4 times what they spent on Trump on Harris, and she pretty much had every single major institution, both media, higher education, Hollywood, everything behind her, and she still didn't get over the finish line. So,
Well, yeah,
I
but she was
just-
also the sitting vice president.
yeah, she was. So she had even more going for than this Andy Bashir. I'm not impressed with this guy.
So,
Well, hey,
Brother
Raleigh,
James, Brother
oh,
James.
there's Chris.
They need to
Oh,
find a
love it.
message first.
Chris, give him the history, man.
well,
Chris,
Oh,
give him the history.
Hold on, I got to respect the hand raising. James has
Oh.
been there for a while. Just give him a chance. And then Chris, I will call on you.
all right.
Sorry I missed you guys yesterday. I watched a little bit of it last night and I saw Sean Spicer on. I said, boy, in the morning I'm not going to be there. Oh, Sean pops in. So congratulations on that. That was really, really neat. I'm a lifelong Republican, so therefore it qualifies me to pick the next Democratic nominee. I can tell you some of who's not going to be it. None of the old guard. And that basically is from Obama all the way back, going to have a lot to do with it. They're done, I think, in the Democratic Party. They may help raise money, but they're done as far as their influence. It's going to come down to me, I think, a battle between, except for Bernie Sanders, who won't run, but he will have influence. Bernie will. he'll be the exception to that. It's going to come down to them fighting it out with what is really pretty much where the party is today, the left, the far left, however you want to characterize it. And there are some moderates there. So I think I'm gonna, if I had a chance to answer that question this morning, I was going to tell them, all three of our great guests on two-way, they were all wrong. Their nominee is going to be Maryland Governor Wes Moore. And then they're going to really struggle on picking a vice presidential nominee. They're going to try to find a woman, and it will not be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because, like I say, that fight will have to happen in that party. They will look for somebody like that current representative who in New Hampshire who is named Maggie Goodlander, but she is so new and frankly so young. I don't think she's quite ready. And then they're going to struggle to find someone, and I think they will end up turning to, if they don't, and I'm not, I've looked at their party. I'm not sure there's just not a lot there in governors or congressmen or Senate that's going to match up. They will end up turning to a Shapiro, even though it's Maryland and Pennsylvania. They'll end up turning to that, or maybe a Beshear. But if they want to try to win in 28, they're going to have to go moderate, and they're definitely going to go younger, because it's going to be their young guns against the Republican young guns in that election. So you can go ahead and go to Vegas on that bet. Wes Moore is a very, very capable governor from what I'm seeing. He's pretty inexperienced, but he's really a military guy. Doesn't seem to be way out there on the left. So that's my opinion on that.
Thank you, Brother James. Next, our gentleman from Georgia, Chris, and then it'll be followed by Pharrell and Joshua.
Okay, so on the history lesson first. Jimmy Carter was an unknown. Obama was not considered serious at first. And Bill Clinton was an unknown from Arkansas. So how known you are at this stage, I don't think is all that relevant, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, the core Democratic Party is not stupid enough to nominate AOC. They know she's a polarizing figure. But I also don't think it'll be Wes Moore, because a lot of Democrats, we know that race still plays a role in these races. And don't tell me, oh, you elected Obama, because Obama didn't even get over 43% of the white vote. So white folk have never voted in majority for a black candidate. And I think after this last election, the Democrats are going to be like, we're going to put up another black person after Kamala. I mean, she barely lost, but they only put, you made the comment, somebody made the comment, they put all that resource behind her. Well, that was the candidate they had. But Kamala, James Carville was right, was our 7th string quarterback. She's a lousy politician. She has no real charisma that makes people like her. So she had all kinds of problems. The only reason she was even relevant was because Biden made the first mistake of making her the VP in the first darn place. And she didn't do well in any presidential attempt of her own. So she's irrelevant. I think it's going to be Beshear or Shapiro or some unknown congressman that has yet to surface, like Jimmy Carter surfaced, like Clinton surfaced from Arkansas. It's definitely not going to be, and I agree with Jim Jen, they need to go younger and they need to go moderate, and they need, and it won't be a woman either. We just tried that. We're not that stupid. It's not going to be a woman, and it's not going to be a black guy. It's going to be a white man. And if I were doing the picking, it'd be a white man, because I just want the Democrats to win.
You just want to win, right?
There you go.
I don't care who's in there.
We just won't go away, will we?
We heard it here first. Oh, did Duke? Okay, I was gonna Pharrell, then Joshua. Got to respect the queue, and then if someone wants to jump in, please.
I was just gonna say, do you think, did not Jon Stewart on the Daily Show just catapult Obama? I know, because I was 20 or 20, probably 25, 24. And I was a Democrat that watched The Daily Show nightly. Jon Stewart was a lot more influential than everyone wants to admit on The Daily Show every night, talking politics. I know nobody wants to believe that, but he was for a lot of people.
Remember, and I'm not going to talk long because you're talking, but
you're good.
You asked the question.
Yeah.
Obama first got a lot of publicity when he gave a speech at the convention.
Yep.
But I actually think Obama's real push was when he went out to Iowa and New Hampshire and had a great ground game and impressed people and did well. He started building momentum because most of the black folks were with Hillary at that point.
Yeah.
Until we realized he could win, and we were like, "Oh, a black guy that can win. We think we'll go with that horse."
And then they absolutely weaponized Facebook and social media. They were the first ones to do that. And
yeah.
So when Obama declared in Springfield, Illinois, the first poll had Hillary Clinton at 56% and Clinton and Obama at 28%. And it was even 55-30 in January. But as Obama began debating Hillary Clinton, he won every debate. And it got so bad that she was in a debate with him and she said, like, to him, "Well, do you not like me?" or something like that. And it was the most awkward, cringy moment I've ever seen in any presidential debate. And he's like, "No, I like you, Hillary." It was really a very... And so after that, she just fell in the polls and he overtook her. And, it's what Chris said, he was so charismatic and she seemed so inauthentic and mechanical. And, that's what happened,
Thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
We got
Hang
Joshua
on.
waiting
Hang on.
patiently here.
Vinny, you got to start raising your hand, man. We
I
like
know,
hearing what you
sorry.
have to say. You got to start raising your hand because
I know.
other people are doing it. They're following the rules, and there's
I
no
know.
reason why you can't.
know.
Joshua, you can go now.
I yield my time to Vinny. No, I'm just kidding. Totally just kidding. Just kidding. Man, so many thoughts. What was it when Bush and Gore were debating and Gore was sort of like pacing, breathing down Bush's neck? What did he say? What did Bush say? Like, "How you doing?" or something like that?
Yes.
That was cringier, I think. That was a cringier moment. Okay, so seriously though, back to the Democrat nominee, I think Chris is completely right as far as it's going to be somebody we don't even have our eye on yet. My question though, and my question is primarily directed at Chris here, as I think he's the resident pulse of the Democrat Party, as far as I know. What is the Democrat base going to focus on for primaries? Because I'm thinking about the last several primaries and the Democrat base. Like if we're talking like, I feel like we always agree that there needs to be a moderate at some point, but how does that moderate break through the primaries?
I think we have an open question there. Oh, maybe Joshua.
No, he's asking Chris.
I think obviously it's going to depend a lot on where the world is at the time that the election is going on. If inflation is in one place or prices are at one place, they'll focus on that. I think what they will probably, you can almost predict that they can focus on is economic opportunity. for the people left behind in society. You know, by that time, I think the border issue is probably going to be pretty much solved, because I think Trump is kind of solving that. I never agree with the Democrats' position on the border. I don't believe in such thing as undocumented, for example. But I think what he will not have dealt with very well is the economy, and his early actions sort of prove it. And that's why Wall Street went crazy, because he may have been believing in tariffs since 1987, but I'm an econ major from a pretty good school, and I can tell you, nobody else that's really educated about economics thinks that was a good idea, which is why they threw up all over him. If he keeps doing stuff like that, their number one issue will be the economy, I think.
Well, let me, I guess, maybe clarify my question, because I'm asking a question about predictions here, right? I'm asking you to predict what the Democrat base is going to demand of their presidential candidate to get through a presidential primary process.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
So, like, you know, we've got a history. I'm using the royal we, right? Like, we have a history of a Democrat base that is very far left. Either a Democrat base that's very far left, but a Democrat establishment that pushes against that. And I would, you know, just as one example, I would go back to the DNC convention where the then mayor of, like, LA or something, like Villanueva or whatever, you know, the crowd, the delegates at the DNC wanted to remove the Jerusalem stuff from the DNC's platform. He called for a voice vote. Everybody in the room, you know, shouted in favor of the motion that that Jerusalem isn't the capital of Israel. I can't remember the exact motion, but it's something like that. And then he went ahead and said, "Nope, nays have it." Right? So, like, there's a history there of combat between the base and the establishment. But also, like, I don't know how the Democrat Party works at a local level, like when it chooses, if it has committees and things like that, like the Republican Party does.
Oh yeah, it does.
Okay, it's like selection committees and
All
things
right,
like
well,
that.
let me try to, and then I'm gonna stop talking just because other people need to get in. But I think that battle between the far left and the centrists is actually going to be simpler and easier this time, because the centrists feel like the left did stuff that gave the Republicans easy, if not misleading, but easy talking points. The centrists are basically going to tell the left wingers now, go hide in the closet. We'll take care of your issues, but you don't need to be out talking. The centrists are going to do the talking. They're not going to talk about the stuff that they know will drive Republican turnout, just like Trump didn't talk about DEI that much before the election because he wanted more black and brown votes. But once he got the election, he mentions DEI every day. But in his two big speeches at Madison Square Garden and the Republican National Convention, he didn't utter the phrase DEI a single time. Think about that one. The Democrats are going to get smarter and play the same game. They're going to keep their left-wing folk in the closet. They're going to run a moderate guy like a Bashir or Shapiro. And then when they get in power, they'll do more of what their friends on the left who not to get out of the closet want them to do.
I still think you're sort of like maybe talking around the point, because you've got to have those primaries. You can't
I'm telling you that, for example, in South Carolina, the South Carolina Democratic primary, as Clyburn proved when he anointed Biden, is dominated by centrist black folk who have, by the way, zero use for the AOC types. And the black folk in Georgia, zero use for the AOC types.
Professor Kenny and then Duke.
Yeah, so a couple things. I kind of agree with Chris in the sense that we probably won't even know who the Democratic nominee is. I keep laughing. It's good conversation, but it's April 11th, folks. It's April 11th.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're talking
Yeah.
bullshit here. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I mean, it's good to talk about. It's inside baseball and it's fun, but we don't know what the hell's going to go on. Right? If what I laugh about is if, all of these people making these arguments against Trump, if Trump can get his messaging back on track, because that's where the problem is, and that's his major issue is he doesn't message well. He just shoots from the hip. There is a method to the madness, but I don't think it helps when he doesn't go out and explain things to the country and explain his plan. See, right now he has an opportunity. He's tripling, quadrupling down on China. So what he needs to do is he needs to have some kind of successful talk with Iran, which, by the way, timing of all of this shit is terrible because you need to have talks with Iran, have successful talks with Iran, and you can't let them be overshadowed by this tariff stuff, and which is very likely to happen. Okay, so because he's fighting the losing battle against the legacy media, so his wins really need to be pronounced and they need to be brought out front, so that's a problem there. Like I said, with this timing. So if he can announce 70 countries, we've made deals with 70 countries. You see that they're even backing out on that. It's not that they're backing out on the number, it's backing out on the timing of it. They're talking about how it's going to take time and all of this stuff. You need to be able to sell to the American people. Look, we've made deals with all of these countries, and China still trying to screw us. See, that's something the American people can get behind. If you can sell that, you know what I mean? If you can really people say, yeah, the Chinese are screwing us. Anytime you tell an American you're getting screwed or I'm screwing you, an American gets his back up. And that's what you need to do here. You need to, we all need to unite against China. The problem is if the markets still go in the tank over this, then, he's having a problem. He's having a big problem here.
And
So
can I add, Professor Kenny,
Yeah.
the China stuff, that is a well fertilized garden in the United States to go ahead and get all pissy with China. So that is I think that's frankly the messaging against China is going to be a win.
yeah, and he needs to do that, Joshua, but he also he needs to be even more aggressive. Like the guy from Shark Tank, I forget his name. He's like, "Why are we wasting our time? Go to 400% tariffs." You know what? I'm like, I get with the media and I tell the country, Angel, I'll call you right back. I get with the country and I would be like, "Look, here's what we're doing. Don't buy any Chinese products. Okay. Of course, we need medicine and stuff, so that's a little tricky, right? But we just doubled up because China needs us more than. And Luke can follow up on this with me because Luke knows more about China than I do. But China needs us. We need China, but they need us too. And if we just double down and buckle up, and we have a summer of fighting with China and getting them to the table. Problem with the Chinese is they're not going to come to the table groveling. We need to give them a way to come to the table where it makes their people seem like they're the ones in control, even though we're the ones in control. And that's a real problem for us politically. You know what I mean? If you can find some way, like if you as you're making these deals with Vietnam and whatever, if you can have we're gonna have Chinese representatives also sitting in on these deals because of the fact some bullshit excuse to get America and China in a room, and then you go, all right, let's take 5 minutes to go off to the side here, and then make a friggin' deal. then that would be great. The problem is the Chinese never stick to the deal. So I don't
Yeah.
know where, I don't know what we're going to do there. So, but to me, this whole Trump thing is all about messaging. You got to sell it to the American people.
Mhm.
And then you need to, the whole big plan should be, we got 1 year, meaning my first year, we got, what do we got, 8 months left. I need to come to the State of the Union in January 26th and say, America is strong. We stopped the war in Ukraine. Inflation is down. The border is secure, and we've got fair trade now. We're not getting screwed by 75 countries, and we've worked out a deal with China. You say that, I don't know what the hell the Democrats are going to do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's the plan. But the problem is Trump doesn't think that way. And plus, Trump doesn't think about the future of the Republican Party because Trump's not a Republican. Trump's a Trump. And that's the biggest problem we have. And he's going to be in for a rude awakening in 2026 if the Democratic Party can take back can take back the House or something like that. Then it's going to be a problem. And you gotta have all of the success in 1 year, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And then you got to spend the next year fighting for you. He's got to be on the stump for a year, fighting for these candidates so that we can take control. We get a bigger expansion of leads in the House and the Senate. The Senate, there's 33 seats up in the Senate. 20 of them are Republican, 13 are Democrats. The last time we had this situation, 4 went to Democrats, 1 went to Republicans. So we still had the tie-breaking majority in the Senate. But if you blow the House out your ass, well, then you're going to get nowhere. You're going to get nowhere. And that's all I got to say for now.
Thank you, Professor Kenny. In the queue, Duke, then James, and then Michael.
I'm just curious how many people think we'll be dropping bombs in Iran by May.
Not gonna I don't think it's gonna happen.
Not me.
Do you think Iran's going to come to the table?
Don't care.
No.
Don't know, don't care. Just don't think we're gonna be dropping bombs on them by May. That's what, 20 days?
Yep.
Yeah, don't think that's gonna happen.
Just my opinion. I don't think they're going to come to the table, and I think they're going to make it clear they're not going to come to the table. And again, that's just my opinion, but it does concern me, and it would get the eye off China, and the trade deal there, which Trump is known to do. So,
Thank you,
that's it.
Duke.
It
Michael,
could happen.
and then just a courtesy call on Luke because it's late in China, and then Joshua. So, Michael, please go ahead.
I think James was before me.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was just.
I'll go after you.
I'll keep
They
it short.
jump the queue. My bad.
I was gonna say that I think that America, we've been static for a long time. We're very, very big, and if whatever we're gonna do with China, whether we fail or succeed or whatever, it has to be done now. It's the same concept. If you are in a plane crash, okay, and you're on the top of a mountain, you better get started walking now. Because if you wait around, aside from gathering supplies, this is a dumb analogy, but if you wait too long, you're going to get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker, and then you're not going to be able to get up and keep walking. So we either do it now and we stick to our guns and stick through it, and Trump is the only avenue that's going to do any of this crazy shit. If you're on the other side and you think he's just a chaos machine, so we have to do something now, because otherwise, in 10 years. There's a damn good chance that China will surpass us. I mean, that's, and that's going to be the next 50 years, and I don't really particularly want the 2050s on out. Whenever I exit this earth, I really don't want Chinese hegemony in any area, aside from just being occasional economic, fights, within reason, not actual real fights, not real war, but I think we got to do something now, and I'm on board. I'm with Professor Kenny. I'm hold the line, If it's going to be 400 or it's going to be whatever, fine. I'll take the cut now because it'll be worth it, presumably, error correcting and all that allowed as well. But that's all I have.
Okay. Duke, I think on Iran, I think that just got them boxed in. Israel has got them neutralized. Saudi Arabia is feeling a lot more confident because Trump is back on the scene. I think they're just going to keep them boxed in there. They're going to harass a little bit here and there, but the sanctions are going to be back on them. Let their own people take care of them, but you've got to contain them where they're at now. They were just running loose. We shipped them plane loads of cash, and then they just ran loose here for the last 3 or 4 years, but I think they're back to where they were. On tariffs, I've just seen, there's so much. I posted there, Larry Fink. Everybody knows who Larry Fink is. BlackRock, I guess. He said he's petrified of some of these movements in the short term. That means we're on the right track because Larry Fink is a very wealthy, successful man, but he hasn't always done it in the interest of his own country. But on tariffs in general, there's two things that just keep coming out to me. One is that no matter where you're at in the world, if you're selling a product, the first country you want to sell your product in is where? It's to us. Because one, the dollar, and two, we're about 40% of the world's GDP. People, I don't care whether you're from a small country in Africa, Asia, Poland, it doesn't matter. You want to sell to us first. You want to sell to everybody, but you want to sell to us first if you're going to sell overseas. And the second big factor is that it's the United States Navy that keeps the sea lanes open. Go to all the countries in the Pacific Rim. Go to the Philippines. Go to Vietnam, which China influences a lot. It doesn't matter. Do you want the Pacific Fleet? Do you trust the Pacific Fleet to keep the Straits of Malacca open? Or do you want to go to Uncle Xi and say, would you send out, you built this really impressive Navy, will you send it? No, they do not. Who's going to keep the Straits of Hormuz open? It's us. Who's going to keep the Red Sea open? It's us. There's no one else. There may be, France may send a little bit, England may send a little bit. All countries have a little bit of Navy, but none of them compare to us. Then Europe is not going to go ask Vladimir Putin to keep the Suez Canal open. They don't trust these people. They fear them. And in many cases, they get along with them because they do fear. China is real. I don't discount that. But you're starting to hear more and more talk among a lot of think tanks and talking heads on the media of what's been said for a while. And our friend Luke confirmed some of this. Xi has issues over there in China. The middle class has grown about as much as it can. Their whole financing system on a local level is how they finance their governments and stuff like that is phony for the most part. It's just paper that's no good. So I think we got to deal with China. And I'm like Michael, I think you need to go ahead and do it right now because they need us more than we need them. They're an export nation. They've shut down trying to sell to their own people for the most part. Like Luke said, buying a Major League Baseball jersey is a luxury item to those people. They're not as advanced as we think they are on a local level as far as in the thing that differentiates that makes them different is that word of freedom. They simply don't have the freedom over there to do what we do. So I'm not near as worried about the tariffs. I don't care the up and downs. I know it's panicking a lot of people on Wall Street, but that's just part of this world that we're trying to change. And I think it's going to be a little bumpy and it's going to be a little tough, but it's also going to be interesting to watch.
Thank you, James. Joshua.
Yeah, just sort of rapid fire. China, completely agree. Bump those tariffs. like I mentioned, the ground the ground has been well fertilized as far as turning Americans, everyday Americans' ire over to China, whether it's the Chinese balloon debacle, whether it's Chinese espionage that's just never ceasing, right? Um, uh, or whether it's using China as the true or not the scapegoat for the death of American manufacturing. I think we're by and large, I think Americans are all on board and ready for that fight. And I think, to be honest, I think even when it starts to affect their pocketbook, particularly millennials and Gen Xers, maybe less Gen Zers, but millennials and Gen Xers, I think will stay the course as far as China as the enemy is concerned. Iran, man, I hated the nuclear deal from the very beginning when Obama proposed that, and the trusting Iran to not create a nuclear weapon and then giving them boatloads of cash and taking away sanctions. It's like it's crazy. It's crazy because it just allowed them to do more of what they always do, and that's fund non-government actors, and terrorists to sow chaos around the Middle East. Um, the best defense strategy that has ever been implemented is deterrence. The most successful defense strategy, deterrence, right? Nobody's launched nukes, since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? But when I say deterrence really started once we developed, intercontinental ballistic missiles. So we're talking like post Eisenhower. We're talking about like Kennedy era, right? When deterrence came into effect.
Slim Pickens did bomb Moscow.
Okay, fine. All right. And outside Dr. Strangelove, we haven't done anything. All right. That movie was great, man. They made fun of the John Birchers too, about poisoning our Russians poisoning our waters. Anyway,
That movie's better now than it ever has been.
I agree. I agree. But the Iran is now that they have proven that they have the capacity to refine uranium for energy uses, there's nothing that's going to stop them from further refining to weapons grade uranium. But even if they did, I guess I don't fear the nuke as much as a lot of people do, because we have all the nukes. Israel has nukes. France has nukes. Britain has nukes. Look at India and Pakistan and their constant fighting over Kashmir. They both have nukes. I'm more worried about, I guess perhaps the idea that they could have a nuke and then let it go to a terrorist organization. I don't think they would do that either, because it would be traceable back to them. Right? They would, and as crazy as I think the ideology is of the death to America, death to Israel sort of ideology over there, I still think they're a rational actor on the global stage. I don't think the Ayatollah is the Ayatollah might promote suicide bombers, but he's not a suicide bomber himself.
You notice how Trump talked the other day about Iran, about how great the people in Iran are?
Yeah.
He constantly says that. The people in Iran are great. They use, I guess you might say it's a little bit of a dog whistle. That's where I believe they're encouraging. They're encouraging their own people to take care of them.
Yeah. that's the right move in Iran, I think, is to support some regime change. Not like, I don't know, I guess somebody could obviously go back and say, well, that's what the CIA did in the beginning with Mohammad Mossadegh and the Shah and blah blah blah. I mean, I guess, you know,
If they
but
if they
I
get
mean,
it,
there's opportunity costs for every decision. So, you know, we've got to we can only look at the past so much when we try to determine, you know, the correct current course.
if they get a nuke, I am completely confident that we in Israel will take it out, and every Arab nation and every nation in that corner of the world will stand up. When they
I
won't stand
100%
up and
agree
do
with
it,
that.
they'll just go,
Yeah.
thanks a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. I agree with that 100%, particularly Saudi Arabia.
Particularly Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
been great.
We
Wrap it
had
up.
back in the day when when we were friendly with Iran in the 70s, you know, toward the end, they actually had a competition for Iran to adopt one of our air fighters, and they had a fly off between F-15 and an F-14. And for what Iran, for the strategic things that they wanted to do, they ended up they went with the F-14 Tomcat. And then Israel, a little bit later on, actually was in the same kind of mode. And they had the same kind of choices, but we were a little bit more not as friend. Actually, we gave more allowances to to Iran than we did to Israel for the thing. But eventually, and it's in the same kind of fly off. Israel determined that the F-15 was the way to go, and they went that well. But little dumb, little bit of history there. But
Aren't they?
And they were correct, because the F-15 is an amazing aircraft. It's an amazing airframe.
Absolutely,
I
and
know
it's
up-
still to this day. Sorry.
Yep.
Up to a few years ago, wasn't Iran still trying to use the F-14? I mean, I know they were in the movie Maverick.
Yeah,
but-
I was about to
but I
say
mean-
that, James.
But I mean, that was a real thing. I mean, and they may still have them. A few of them they're trying to use. I don't know.
They're still trying to use the F4.
Yeah.
Well, we're still using the A-10, but I'm a fan of the A-10, so I don't.
It's saving us a lot of money.
My dad was in a field training detachment on the F4, and we were in Germany. This would have been the late 60s, and we were selling the F4 to Iran, and he had some. He taught fire control and weapons control systems radar, and they sent some pilots over to train, and a couple of them failed, and they came to my dad and said, you might want to reconsider that failing grade, because when he gets home they'll kill him. Better to let him crash his plane.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Isn't that a wonderful country that does that? I mean, my
Yeah,
God.
and that was under the Shah that we supported.
It's screwed up as we think we are sometimes. You just have to get a little bit of a grip and look at that kind of stuff, and which is still so prevalent in so many places.
Yeah. I tell you what, the thing that made me appreciate America like nothing else was deployments. Deployments to Iraq was, I mean, it was like I mean, there's just no comparison. There's just no comparison.
You learn what third world is. What it means.
Yeah.
I went to 2015. I went to China on some business, and to look at maybe buying some product or looking at some of their equipment for flooring. And we flew into Shanghai. Spent a couple of days in Shanghai, took a couple of day trips out of there, but then we God, I don't even know where it was. I know it was northeast China, and I mean, hell, you get out of the major cities and they're still using brooms, which is a stick hooked to a bunch of branches. And then you're on this. I remember being on a 6-lane highway, and we were the only car. They've been, and then this was during their building boom, and every place you went, they were putting up high rises. But you talk to the locals, and it's like, yeah, we're putting up high rises, but we don't have anybody to put in them.
That's
They
interesting.
were
Thank you
just
for-
building to turn dollars.
Thank you for that, Duke. We have Dean from Ohio.
Thanks. Hey, I want to, I don't know how long you guys are going, but I want to respond to something that Chris said and tie it back to the main meeting when they were talking about whether Governor Shapiro would have a chance in the general, be able to make it through to the general election. I saw something online, and it was a while back, Denzel Washington describing the difference between race and culture, or he was at least making the distinction about somebody making the Goodfellas. I don't know the director. I can't remember, but he was an Italian guy why could only an Italian guy make the Goodfellas? Why can only this other one make a predominantly black movie? And he says it's not about race, it's about culture. And he had a couple of examples about that. I thought that was pretty interesting. Are we in the same I'm wondering, I take Chris to heart about the black vote. And I was thinking about that with the Jewish vote. Are we talking about more cultural issues that determine how folks are going to vote? Or is it still more on the race side? And I'll address that first to Chris and then anyone else that wants to answer. Do you believe it's more about cultural issues that keep people voting in the block, or do you believe it's more more about the race?
Well, I mean, black people fundamentally don't trust the Republican Party, and they've given us lots of reasons to continue not to trust them. So, I don't know whether that's called. I think that's both, really. I mean, it's not Democratic. It's not Democrat-run legislatures that do everything they can to make it harder for certain people to vote. Or, for example, in the state of Tennessee, where I grew up, when we had the whole situation with taking down Civil War monuments, like in what country does a group of people who tried to succeed from the country get to put up monuments to their failed leaders? But in the South, they did it. And in Tennessee, after George Floyd and all that, when they tried to take them down, the Republican-dominated legislature passed a law that told the black folk in Memphis, where it's pretty much dominated politically by blacks in Memphis, where I'm from, oh, it's now a state law. You can't take it down. Can't take down this monument to this former KKK general. Well, the city got slick and hired a law firm and figured out that they could sell the land that the statue was on to a nonprofit, and then the nonprofit took it down. And the Republican-dominated legislature said, oh, y'all think y'all slick. Well, guess what? We just cut the budget for Shelby County, where Memphis is. I could talk for 8 hours about this, but I'm just saying, when I hear certain black folk, like a couple that talk on the forum here sometimes, say, oh, black folk are so stupid, they just so used to voting Democrat. No. Let's put it this way. It's not Democrat presidents that put folk on the Supreme Court who then say, we know America screwed black folk for decades, but no affirmative action efforts to make up for all that bad history. That's not legal. It's Republican nominees that come over with that conclusion. So for black folk, it'll be hell will freeze over before that many of us go to Republicans unless they change their stripes.
Okay, I heard the Civil War monuments. I heard voter ID issues that purportedly.
John Lewis voting bill, um, reform for criminal justice reform. The Republicans blocked that, and they put out that black senator from South Carolina. You know what I'm talking about.
Tim Scott.
Yes, Tim Scott. They put him out as the leader of their discussion on criminal justice reform to make it look like there was a black guy who was opposed to what the Democrats really wanted. But black folk know that when Tim Scott runs for office in South Carolina, he only gets 8% of the black vote. There's a reason for that. We know what he is, and we've got a phrase for him. I won't say what it is, but y'all know what it is.
No, you know what it is. We don't have to say it here. Chris, so would you say the same? I guess then I don't understand why you're saying that the Democrats shouldn't have a black candidate. And let me put that aside for a second.
Because there's enough white folk who won't vote for him. Obama never got more than 43% of the white vote, and he is one of the most brilliant politicians of a generation. So the only reason Obama won was because black folk and Latinos at the time came out in droves, voted 98-2 on the black side for Obama. And then that married up with a minority of the white vote who, because the white vote wanted Romney more and they wanted McCain more. So when I hear white folks say, oh, we're post-racial because we elected a black president, I say, no, you didn't. A minority of y'all did, teamed up with the blacks and the Latinos. There's never been a black candidate who got more than half the white vote.
That electorate, you don't think in this current time could hire another black individual?
Oh, okay. So Dean, let me answer that this way. Kamala almost got in there, right? I mean, she barely lost. So of course one could. But my point, if I'm a Democratic Party strategist, unless you want 12 years of Republican dominance, because if Vance gets in there, he'll be in there for 8. If I were the only Democratic Party strategist, I would say we need to take every measure possible to minimize the chances of a loss. So yes, Dean, it's possible that Westmore could win. My point is,
the odds from
I don't want to risk it.
Yeah, I guess I look at it. I like that Steve Ellendorf guy that shows up on, and I'm saying his name wrong, but he's a Democratic strategist. He worked for Gephardt, and he has 3 A's. One is authenticity.
Yeah.
2 is grabbing attention, being able to grab people's attention, and 3 is action. And I see that. Josh Shapiro, he looks like a pretty good guy. I was glad that Kamala didn't, from my perspective, I was glad that Kamala, however you pronounce her name, Harris, did not, I'm glad that she did not take him on the ticket. And I thought that was a dumb call. But they were, at the time, I hope they didn't look at him and say he's got too much ambition. What I think happened is that they wanted to shore up their progressive base, and they didn't want to take on the Middle Eastern conflict at that time. But I look at him now and thinking, I think he checks the boxes for those 3, and I hated to hear that the Democratic Party wouldn't bring forth a Jewish.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that that's the case, but Shapiro didn't want to be on her ticket.
Right.
Okay, folks, we have 4 hands up here. I just wanted to give just read the queue: Joshua, Alan, James, and then Professor Kenny and Dean. Thank you for sharing.
Great questions, Dean. Thanks.
Thank you.
When I was vice chair of the York County, Virginia, very small, right? So, it is what it is. The York County Republican Committee I thought, and this would have been prior to, or this would have been just around 2020, just 2019 timeframe. I thought that it was important for the Republican Party to remember that their roots of the Republican Party were in post-Civil War protections for freedmen, for former slaves. And I don't even consider Lincoln to be the first Republican president. The first Republican president who actually got to govern was Grant. Ulysses S. Grant created the Department of Justice, appointed the first U.S. Attorney General for the sole purpose of combating and destroying the Ku Klux Klan in the South. Ku Klux Klan, obviously, created by former Confederates. The massacres of Black people that took place in the South during Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction, it's almost unfathomable for me to even conceive of that sitting here as a 40-year-old in 2025 America. And I don't know where, I guess, there's the concept of the Southern strategy, I guess, with Nixon. I don't know where that equal rights freedom agenda went off track, freedom and justice agenda went off track with the Republican Party. I don't think, and maybe there's self-bias because you never have the opportunity to have these conversations in a civil way in real life. So again, kudos to this platform. I would like to know where that went off track. In anymore, politics is a numbers game, right? And at the ground level, it's just a numbers game. So to a certain extent, it's like, nobody at the local level is trying to make big shifts here and there. They're just trying to win on the margins. And so the handshaking, the door knocking campaigns, the boots on the ground sort of campaigning for local elections as well as congressional legislative elections, that's math. It's math. It's not anything other than math. So in order to have sort of weave in again, but I would really like to see the Republican Party get back to its roots of justice and Grant. Look, I'm in Virginia, right? So I was just driving down Monument Street in Richmond, Virginia, just this past weekend, right? I never understood the South's obsession with the Confederacy and the glorification of the Confederacy, and I always viewed the Confederate flag. Look, I view the Confederate flag no different than I view the ISIS flag, as a matter of fact. And so I don't know why for the longest time we tolerated it, other than just simply just inertia for the numbers, and for the political support, which I guess brings it back to Trump. Trump isn't a Republican. He's not a Democrat. Trump is doing things that upset both sides and he doesn't give a shit, right? Like, you can sort of question his motives, but I imagine that Trump has good motives for doing the things that he's doing, or he wouldn't do them. I mean, I don't know what the negative, unless you just think he's an evil bastard, but anyway, yeah. So I see. Yeah, Chris is nodding. Yes, Chris. Yeah, Trump has everything to gain being the evil Bond villain. He has everything to gain, doesn't he?
Well-
No, but I'd really like to stick, to that sort of. And welcome back to the show, Matt. You came back right in time for race conversation, so congratulations. But I'd really like to see the Republican Party get back to a more enlightened rhetorical position, particularly when it comes to equality, right? Like modern days, we get a little bit consumed with the difference between equality and equity, and I think there are real differences there. But you don't have to put down one culture in order to emphasize or raise up another culture. But that's what that's what happens with the Democrats. That's what happens with the Republicans.
Thank you, Joshua. In the queue, we have Alan, James, and then Chris.
Let me unmute. I don't know when the whole Dean's question was from why wouldn't Jewish people vote for Shapiro? And I'm a minority in the Jewish caucus because I've always been a Republican my whole life. So I didn't quite mesh with my culture because they're predominantly vote Democrat. So I just want to touch on that question.
Hey, Alan, I thought Dean was questioning whether the Democrats would put up a Jew, not whether the Jews would
no,
vote.
I just want to give a little perspective on it. It just I don't think. Well, Shapiro made a smart decision not jumping on the ticket with Kamala. I think he's a good politician and he's got a lot of connections to Barack Obama, and I think Barack probably gave him a little inside, hey, don't accept the nomination. You're never going to be able to run again after this.
Right.
Because you're going to get a shellacking. That's what I think happened with that.
Think so.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Jewish thing, and then we got off onto the whole, Confederate monuments and things like that. So I don't know. I'm gonna cede my time to Chris because or I'm gonna cede my time to James because he's up next. So
Well done, Alan. Well done.
so thank you.
Brother James.
I wasn't here yesterday. If y'all had been where I was at, I got to take that call. Go ahead.
Chris.
Oh, James, you got to do something else?
Yeah, it's a work day.
Work. This is just work. He's now,
Yes.
so yeah.
Yeah. See, I don't, I hate it when I hear the current day Republicans try to claim, well, Lincoln was a Republican and he freed the slaves. The modern day Republican Party, as far as most Black Southerners are concerned, started in the 60s because in the mid to late 60s, pretty much every Southern state had 2 Democratic senators. Now, I think the only state that has 2 Democratic senators, or even one,
Georgia,
is Georgia, and that's gonna change soon because Ossoff and Warnock were elected by a hair, and the Governor Kemp is very popular, and he might run. He'll beat one of them. So that's not even, that's not gonna last much longer, I don't think. But the reason that all the Senate seats in the South switched from Democrat to Republican was as soon as Lyndon Johnson made sure that the Civil Rights Bill passed, enough white Southerners to win elections said, to hell with the Democrats, they like black folk too much. That's what happened. That would also explain why, as I pointed out to some people before, see, when people tell me that folk voted for Trump because of the price of eggs or whatever, I'm like, well, that's interesting. Because in the Midwest and the Northeast, Trump got, in general, about 55% of the white vote. But in the South, he got from 62 to 82% of the white vote. And don't tell me that the price of eggs was so much higher in the South that that drove white vote in the South. Something else is driving white vote in the South. And when you put a candidate like Kamala in, whatever that thing is that's driving it, it drives it more. So the current day Republicans, about who they put on the court, I mean, what they've been trying to do on the court, they've been working their game since the 80s, and they finally got the court that gave them what they wanted on affirmative action. And no, I don't believe in guaranteeing certain outcomes for certain folk. But in a country where up until the 70s and in many cases the 80s, there was a blatant, understood discrimination against my people. And then now people say, well, okay, we're all good now. We don't need to do anything extra to make up for the situation we caused. That's why 88% of black folk in Georgia voted for Kamala. Not because they love Kamala, because we don't trust Republicans.
Well, you know my take, Chris. FDR started this with his Executive Order 6102, and I recommend America's Book of Secrets on Netflix, the whole history of the Fort Knox, for a kind of grand take on where we're at. Alan raised his hand.
I mean, I understand where Chris is coming from. I have an understanding. And it opens the eyes of something, Republicans need to sort of hear this and not rest on laurels of, oh yeah, well, Lincoln was a party of Lincoln freed the slaves, so let's rest on those laurels. I can understand it. I would like to see more, more more growth of the party. So like, I think, Republicans in general need to hear this and make some adaptations to things. Because like we talked about it, Chris, after you left, we talked about last night, like, if you were my candidate here in Tallahassee running against a bad Republican candidate, hearing you talk about the issues, you would give me, I wouldn't just vote R down the ticket. We need to listen to voices and try to hear and adopt some policy. But that's just me. But like, but the question then posed is like, if there was a Republican, Chris, that was a better candidate than the Democratic candidate, like, is that something you would consider? Would that give you weight?
Oh, I've said before, I could vote for a Romney or a McCain. I had dinner with McCain and 3 other people once. I could even vote for W.
Okay. No, I mean, it's just like, that's the kind of mindset, like, both parties need to get out of this tribalistic mindset. Like, I have to vote for the R, I have to vote for the D, because at the end of the day, like, listening to you, Chris, and talking about your career, like, if you would be an asset to the government in creating policy. And I touched on it yesterday in the morning meeting we did, was like, I have 10 issues, Chris has 10 issues, we come to the table, right? We
Right.
find the 3 we can agree on and like move that forward for the betterment of everyone,
Right.
not for our party, not but I don't think either party has the grace to extend like, hey, Chris and I came to the table and we passed this bill. We came up with this policy, right? So that's just I want to interject a little
Good
bit,
point.
like
Yep.
grace and the understanding that Mark's always talking about, like, that's what I want to interject in this as well. So I'm good.
Please, Joshua, if you'd like to speak.
Yeah, Chris, why did LBJ, senator from Texas,
Yeah.
clearly a racist? I don't think anybody'd
Maybe.
argue. Okay. Why would he sacrifice the Democrat hold on the South? And again, the old Democrat, Southern racist, segregationist Democrat. My dad fought in the Confederacy South. Why would he sacrifice that to pass the Civil Rights Act? Was it just sort of like the legacy of Kennedy? Like, why would he? Why?
No,
why
it
did he
definitely
do
wasn't the
that?
legacy of Kennedy. He didn't give a rat's ass about Kennedy. They didn't even
Yeah.
get along. A couple of things about Johnson on a personal level. Johnson grew up dirt poor, number one. So Johnson had an affinity for poor people of every stripe, white, black, no matter what. Johnson, very few people know this. Johnson, early in his life, taught like elementary school age Latino kids down in Southern Texas.
Yeah.
So he has seen up close and personal the lives of these people. Now, on the political side, I think Johnson was thinking, though, and I think he was quoted someplace as saying this, that he was guaranteeing that black folk would vote the Democratic Party forever. Well, he was kind of right about that. But the white Southerners' reaction cemented it, because as soon as he got that stuff passed, and see, I've listened to the tapes of Johnson talking to Mississippi senators about passing that civil rights legislation. And he used the N-word repeatedly on those tapes, by the way.
Yeah.
But see, that's politics. He knew who he was talking to. And what he basically told those senators from Mississippi was, I don't like these N-words any more than you do. That's what he told them. But if we don't pass this, they're going to get something else that's even more than what you want. So he was negotiating with them behind the scenes. He said all the right stuff in his State of the Union address. But behind the scenes, he was selling them a compromise, to get it through. But actually, I consider Johnson, and I think a lot of black folk my age in their 60s do too. I mean, if you go back and look at the speech Johnson gave right after the Selma March, when they almost beat John Lewis to death, the speech Johnson gave to a joint Senate, House, whatever meeting, it is one of the most moving, emotionally speeches for any black person of my age, because he told them, it's time to stop pretending we don't have these problems. It's time to stop screwing these people, and we're gonna pass some legislation to fix it. And if you don't, I'm gonna run over you with a freight train. He was strong, strong.
Yeah, I'll look that up. I'm interested in that.
Yeah, you'd find that you'd find that interesting. I think.
I would be remiss if I did not share this with you and the YouTube audience, right? Vince Everett Ellison, his father was, I don't know, right by MLK's side or just part of the MLK, believing in MLK, right? But this mirrors my experience in union organizing, deceptions, and the pushing people up in the media spotlight and then controlling them. So, I mean, this is the elephant in the room. Vince Everett Ellison. This is the guy to either get behind or then come out and debunk. But until we really analyze who MLK was, and part of that greater psychological operation that was going on, then we're just going to keep getting stuck in circles.
So Raul, since you brought this up, why don't you mention, because I'm about to really engage in real debate warfare with you. Since you brought it up with a vague assertion, why don't you name for our friends here the biggest thing we need to know about MLK that we don't know? That's a problem.
Well, that his perversions made him easily exploitable by the FBI, and Vince Everett Ellison says they were spying, tapping him, because when you have an asset, we've all seen Breaking Bad, right?
Okay, so even if I give you that, what I think is ridiculous assertion, what did the FBI get him to do that was a problem for Black America or America? All I ever heard the guy preach was, we need to treat everybody fairly and right, and we need to not use violence. So what message are you suggesting that the FBI was forcing him to give out that was so horrible?
Well, if you associate someone who's perverted with preaching and then make them so basically, if you're an atheist, MLK is like one of your top God figures. Like, you're an atheist, but you support MLK because as a humanist, right, you must support MLK. So that then causes, that hypocrisy then is making people take sides on behalf of what exactly?
Nobody cares. Nobody cares about
Yeah,
MLK's religion. They care that man could get Black.
You told us
and
Trump was
white
a tyrant.
America.
You told us Trump was a
He
tyrant.
could get white America to look at itself and say, you know what? We need to stop letting what's happening to those folk happen to those folk. There's nothing else about MLK. And by the way, yeah, he was a whore, just like JFK and Trump and some others that we probably don't know about.
Well, I don't see with Trump. I don't see that if you hold up against him. The mall room incident or whatever, he wasn't married. That was not consensual. And that was consensual according to what's her name, the crazy gossip columnist. And Trump wasn't married at the time. So
you mean grab him by the parts, Trump?
He said that, but unlike Bill Clinton, you don't have 10, 20 women in public.
Yeah, this isn't going anywhere. Like, this is sort of silly. Right now, this doesn't make any sense, and I'm not tracking at all.
I'll add this. Che Guevara, okay, I know people whose dad, they said, was tortured by Che Guevara's people, okay? Che was against gay people, but now he's an icon. Che Guevara was even signing the banknotes. And the joke is, some guy said to Rudy Giuliani, right? They said, who's the best communist? And Che heard analyst, like financial analyst. He raised his hand. I'm just saying, Che Guevara, MLK, Gandhi, these are not who people think they are. Luke, you got your hand raised.
Well, no, I just wanted to say the thing about Trump saying he grabbed women by whatever. I always get this. I always get upset about this because people don't realize he didn't say that. He was saying that they would allow them to do that because they want to be so close to power and money that they would allow people to do those kind of things and grab them by that place. And so it was more of a push that Trump was saying, like, look, these women are whores in Hollywood. And I have to kind of agree with them. There's a lot of those kinds of women in Hollywood.
I think he was actually talking about the pageants, wasn't he? But as opposed to Hollywood. Anyway, I think no comment.
Sometimes
this is such a.
Hey, Joshua, why don't you put us back on the railroad line, because we're over in the dirt.
Yeah, we're definitely over in the dirt. I wish there was more ability for different cultures in this country to come together around shared economic goals, as opposed to, and man, this makes me sound like a socialist, I suppose, or a modern socialist anyway, but as opposed to identity politics, like based on skin color. There's more in common, there's more in common between poor whites and poor blacks than anybody than anybody really is talking about. And I guess all politics is local, and maybe I'm jaded for having sort of seen how the sausage is made, as far as elections are concerned and local elections are concerned, just because nobody cares about that. No, like nobody cares about messaging. It's all about shoring up your base. There's no, there doesn't seem to be an ability or a real desire to have somebody step out and look. I'll give Chris grace for this, because I don't know the history of LBJ, but there needs to be, is there room again? And again, I'm speaking from someone who is conservative. Is there room and hunger on the right for someone to emerge like an LBJ and break with the the Southern, I don't know what you want to call it, the Southern coalition? What do we want to call this? The former the Confederate coalition is, we want to call it that.
Yeah,
I mean, it
yeah.
exists. It exists. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, right? So I just wish that we could break that. I wish we could break that association somehow. But it all got fucked up because of the that resurgent lost cause ideology. That the Civil War wasn't about slavery, that the Confederacy wasn't about slavery, that it was about states' rights. And it's like, all right, well, okay. Look at every secession document, right? What does it say, right? Every single one. Look at the speeches given by the vice president of the Confederacy. Like, it just doesn't make sense,
Well,
anyway.
I think sometimes in our history, I think that we forget that when events occurred, they took a lot longer than we think. To us, it's just a flat date in a textbook. And what I mean by that is the American Revolution. Okay, if you go back in time, we did not jump to our guns right off the bat. It was decades in the making for us. We were very, very patient. We were walking up the stairs very slowly until we hit the breaking point where we had to act. Civil War is the same thing. That was decades in the making up to that conflict point or whatever. I mean, in some ways I don't know. I was just going to say, in some ways, we're so integrated as a society in a melting pot, to the point, this is a kind of an offbeat, out of band observation, but for the most part, what do you see now when politics, right or left, encroaches on football games? People get so pissed off and say, "Get this shit out of my face. I don't give a shit. I want to drink a beer and watch the game with my buds." So to a certain degree, we have that. I'm not saying that we have solved all of our problems. We have plenty of problems. We have stuff to work on, but for the most part, I mean, like, look at us. I mean, yeah, we're not all that diverse, but it's also not a bunch of white dudes, old white dudes, yammering on on some obscure point, that only they care about in their demographic. We're pretty well mixed up, as a positive.
I just turned old this year. Actually, I just turned old officially. That's my age, is old.
Yeah, I've been old for a minute.
Chris, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're right about things taking a lot longer to percolate, because see, this divisiveness gets refueled repeatedly. I pointed out to some folk who were on a call one day when I don't think you were on, Joshua, that there's a reason that the first place Ronald Reagan held a public event after he got the Republican nomination in 1980 or whatever. The first place he held a public event was in Neshoba County, Mississippi, Alabama, whoever it was, the county where the 3 civil rights workers were buried. And he gave a speech on states' rights. That was stoking racial Southern crap, and everybody knew it. Then H.W. Bush comes along, and he, on the surface, is all Mr. Nice Guy, but he ran the Willie Horton ad about the black guy who got out of prison and then raped some white woman. That was racial stokery. This stuff has never stopped. And I'm gonna tell you one of the reasons that it's gonna be difficult to bridge the racial issue in certain parts of the country and certain in rural parts is that a key part of Trump's base that guarantees him a plurality of almost any Republican primary is that he was able to motivate a part of the MAGA base that doesn't typically vote, but he got them on this cultural stuff, and he got them all worked up about the cultural stuff. They won't come out to vote for Romney. Romney and the Bushes don't excite them. But when Trump stokes that stuff, then he's playing into this Lyndon Johnson quote, and I'm gonna stop talking for now. Because Lyndon Johnson said in the late 60s, I'm directly quoting Johnson off the internet, and I've seen this for years. If you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice that you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you. That's real, and it's still true in 2025.
We can fix these things. There's history that's buried or right under our noses. And Joshua, just like I've had to put the maybe Hitler was right crowd to bed by learning and sharing what I learned, that Hitler banned the Stirling engine, right? He forced the grid on Germany. This is what debunks the whole, it wasn't about slavery. Okay, this is from the Knights of the Golden Circle, a whistleblower in this Masonic Confederate entity that said, in short, in 1861, the Confederates exiled 25,000 German free people, laborers in Texas who were making the land profitable without slaves. So that was proof positive we didn't need slavery for this particular, the peculiar institution thing. And so they exiled them to Mexico. Okay. And that just shows that, yes, indeed, it was about slavery. And that
you don't have to go that far. Like I said, you don't have to go that far. It's in the secession documents. You don't have to go that far. Like you don't have to go to the Masons.
Well, not the Masons, but just that 25,000 Germans were eliminated from Texas and pushed into Mexico. Like that is versus documents saying, no, people were pushed out. Right.
Yeah.
So that should be a stain on America's history. I mean, in terms of us learning and moving forward, and instead of getting in was it really about this and that, or was Lincoln good or bad?
Sure. Yeah. I mentioned that to just bat away the straw men, a little bit, like to bat away the lost cause, Confederate states' rights sort of thing. Because it's just simply bullshit. Chris, what would the Republican Party have to do to make inroads to African American communities? And I also understand that. Well, and you tell me, right? Like you tell me. I don't think white communities, I don't think Italian communities or Chinese communities or Japanese communities or West African communities or whatever. I don't think there's monolithic blocks but there do seem to be monolithic voting blocks. And, you know, so from a voting perspective, what could Republicans do better to?
Oh, I can tell you a couple of things. They could stop. Number one, they could support the John Lewis voting rights bill. Because, see, here's an example of what I mean about Democrats, Black Democrats, we're not stupid. Yeah, I understand the argument that, nobody should mind, closer voting requirements, identification. But when any study has been done, they find next to no actual fraud going on. So when we see Republican legislatures going through all this trouble to come up with new methods of doing this and doing that, we know what the goal is. The goal is to have fewer of us vote. And on occasion, they've been caught actually saying it. So they could have supported the John Rice voting bill. That's one. Secondly, they can stop pretending, and this is a big one, the whole affirmative action thing. See, the average Black person's view is this: since you kept all our prior generations from doing certain things, there is a lack of knowledge and exposure to certain things. And you need to do something to populate our community with people who are doing some of those things. And on occasion, if there are 100 applicants for a job, and this is going to be very controversial, some of y'all are not going to like this at all. If there are 100 applicants and there's 7 qualified, and if you rank the qualified ones in order of qualified, the Black guy is the 3rd most qualified out of the 7 qualified. We say, well, you know what? To make up for those decades of where you wouldn't even interview the Black guy, you need to let the 3rd most qualified one get the job, so y'all can start making up for the fact that the typical Black kid can't talk to anybody they know who does a certain thing because nobody in their family was ever allowed to do it. Now, until Republicans come to that understanding, and I'm going to tell you who won't agree with it necessarily, the Black Africans who come here, not grandparents that weren't born here, didn't deal with the stuff. A lot of them, they come here, the last thing they want to be mixed in with is African American. They make it clear, oh, I'm African. Because then they think they get treated like a foreigner and not like an African American. But I cannot tell you how many of them I have counseled in my business career who after a few years come to realize, well, you know what? When they see you coming down the hall, they just see Black, brother. They don't notice your butt is from Nigeria. So you got the same problem I do, but you don't even have a strategy for dealing with it because you don't even know what's happening.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's not monolithic. It's not monolithic.
And in the spirit of grace, if I were to apply for a federal government job, or Mike were to apply for a federal government job, guess what? We get veterans preference. We get a +1 or a +2 if we're disabled, if we've got disability benefits. So, and again, in the spirit of grace.
And Joshua, here's the other point. Yeah. Even when it was just white guys, when was this country ever really truly flat out meritocracy? Money, personal connections. Where's the phrase, who you know is more important than what you know come from?
Look, that's the land ownership eligibility for voting in the beginning, right?
Right.
No, I get it. I get it.
So this new mantra, I mean, okay, like Trump likes to run around talking about we're going to return America to a meritocracy. Here's what I would like to know.
Well, it's like free trade, right? It's aspirational, I think.
Yeah, but I'm talking about his talk about the culture stuff, and we're going to be a meritocracy now and no DEI. Here's what I want to know. I know a little bit about Ivy League college admissions. And I know that Fordham, people who go to Fordham for 2 years, very seldom get to transfer into an Ivy League like University of Pennsylvania in their junior year, like he got to do. I'd like to understand how that happened. And I'm pretty sure it's not because he had a 1600 SAT score, because when he talks, he does not sound like an Ivy Leaguer. He only knows about 17 words.
Okay. At least Beautiful's one of them.
Yeah, Beautiful's one of them. The Biggest is the second, But actually,
Beautiful and
I think
Bigly.
that's part of his appeal to the lower income MAGA voter, because the reason they don't remember that he's an Ivy Leaguer is because he doesn't sound like one.
Wow, Chris, you just like that timing for stopping the immersive view couldn't have been any better, because like you ended on that one and just blew up in everybody's screen. It was like Raul was like just a straight, yeah, like a director, like
and cut.
Yeah, like a movie director.
And I know Alan's got his hands. Just get this in real quick. And so, for example, now maybe you all better understand why when that plane crashed in the Potomac or whatever, and the first thing out of his mouth was something about maybe it was because there was a DEI hire on board. Trust me, that's going to drive a lot of black voter turnout in 2026. Wait
You
for
think
it.
it will? I mean,
Oh,
if
yeah,
the Democrats sort of like try to jump on that, but I mean, he increased his minority voter base this year, didn't he? This last election?
Very marginally in the black vote.
Well, but again, in voting, margins
No.
are
But
all
I'm
we ever
saying
argue about.
he did it very marginally. But remember, I said earlier, he didn't say much at all about DEI before the election. He's been
He let
talking
the
about it
Democrats-
every day. And when I go to the black barbershop now, that's what the brothers are talking about.
Are they? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think Kamala, Kamala didn't focus on anything really other than trans rights and things like
Kamala
that.
was weak.
And that just sort of, for sure.
Yeah, she
Are
was
you
weak.
sure? Are you sure she was weak? I mean, I thought she was top tier.
No.
Wasn't that her quote? Wasn't that her quote? She was top tier candidate during the 2020 primaries or the 2019 primary. I'm a top tier
He
candidate.
likes Venn diagrams. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that video.
Yeah.
That like.
What have y'all been talking about?
Oh, we've been talking about racism and the Confederacy, and whew, it's been wild.
Let me just if you'd have,
I'll cede to James.
am I okay? Am I ready?
No,
I won't.
I'm ceding you. You
James
can
and
have
then
my
Professor
time.
Kenny. James and then Professor Kenny.
If you'd have been on this phone call I was on, if you'd have been in court yesterday with me, and it is, if I tell you the story, you would say, ban him from ever coming on here, because obviously he's making this crap up. And Chris, I wish you of all would have been on this phone call I was just on, and you'd have been with me yesterday, and you'd have understood. And I think you do understand it. You would have understood that every time someone says racist, it stopped working. And you are hollering, you are screaming to the day you go to the grave. But what I dealt with yesterday, and what I just about dealt with on that phone call, would, if it doesn't at least change some of your perspective, then nothing's going to change your
Well,
perspective.
tell us about it. Tell us about the call.
I'm just
Without
going to highlight it.
divulging,
I'm gonna
without
do I have
divulging
time?
attorney-client privilege or anything like that. Are you an attorney?
Am I an attorney? No.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
an
okay.
I'm a businessman, but I serve on a town council.
Oh.
And I was in court yesterday because we went through a procedure of condemning buildings that were owned by the previous mayor's brother, because they were being used as, first of all, they look horrible. They're utility buildings. We went through the proper process of condemning those buildings,
Mm-hmm.
and this guy ends up suing us, suing me personally, suing the mayor personally, suing another councilman personally.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to court yesterday. And like I said, I don't have time to explain the whole history of it. You say I was making it up. But I'm going to say this. See how white I am? The guy I was on the phone with was the mayor. He looks a lot more like, he looks like Chris. The guy, the person, the other councilman looks like Chris. And we're in that courtroom, and all I can say is the judge kicked it all out and said, the mayor caused me so upset yesterday afternoon. He said, it's done, it's over. He said, I've never been so embarrassed as a quote black man in my life to hear the crap that come out of the mouths in there. I deal with what's real here. And it is culture, and it sucks. And it hurts everybody. It ain't the color of your skin. It's the stinking, rotten culture that's killing people, that is demeaning people, and it is holding people back. And I don't care what you say. I don't care what Washington politicians say about it on either side of the aisle. They're not dealing with reality. And I heard it all up there yesterday. And I deal with it every single day. And it's not good. And I'll tell you what, the people, whether they're white or black, that want to stand off and have their discussions on racism and all that, they don't live it. They don't live in the neighborhoods. They don't live in the towns. They live in gated communities, both white and black. They live in country estates, all of that. They don't deal with this stinking rotten culture. And it's, you know what? It's organized crime. It really is. I got things I can say that I probably shouldn't say because this is being recorded. And it's going to literally affect future trials. So that's why I'm not going to say it. But I deal with what's real here. Professor. And I think a lot of people, a lot of little small local level politicians like me is trying to do the right thing for everybody, which is hard to do, but they're having to deal with all this crap that comes down.
Okay, thank you, James, for
And
that. Professor
I wish
Kenny,
you'd be a
your
lot more
turn.
specific, but I can't. I may be later on, but anyway.
So I have a question for Chris. So Chris, the bros in the barbershop, how do they feel about stimmies?
About stimmies?
Yeah, you know what stimmies are?
No.
Stimulus checks. So when Trump when Trump sends everybody, you know, a couple thousand bucks.
You mean when the Democrats forced the Republicans' hand and passed it, and then Trump signed his name to it? You mean that?
No, I mean the new ones that are coming because of Doge.
Well, we'll see if that happens. Oh,
well, let's for argument's sake, let's say your boys in the barbershop get a stimmy for about $5,000. They're gonna like Trump, aren't they?
Some of them will.
Yeah.
Some of them will.
Because that's what I've been reading online, by the way. That's why I brought it up. I've been reading how a lot of the male black vote that went to Trump, the real thing that appeals to them is stimmies. That was something I read online.
Well, they weren't anticipating that then.
Yeah.
And the number
stimmies appeal to all of us.
22% of the black male vote went to Trump.
Yeah.
Joshua, with your hand up. Then Chris.
Yeah. I mean, so I think I understand. Getting back to James, you go by James or Jim? What do you prefer?
I go by James, and by the way, the last name, it's okay. It's actually Ginn. It's not Jen, but it is more commonly mispronounced Jen. But I always tell people, it said, well, Jen is what's on your mind and in your heart. Go right ahead. It don't bother me.
All right. Well, James, I think
Gonna call you gin and tonic.
I've been called that.
Jim and tonic. I think again, like sort of getting back to the everything is local issues. I started off my career in the land use and zoning world, and you can't look at. I mean, you can't go into anywhere in the South. I will say that, okay. And my experience in land use and zoning law is in particular in Virginia. You can't go back and look at plat books and deeds going back decades, pre Civil Rights Act, et cetera. You can't go back and find zoning and boundary lines that aren't segregating communities based on race. It's so hard. It's so hard to combat that in the future.
Let me give you something real easy to look up, and maybe you'll understand literally where I'm coming from. Go online and research Jonesboro, Louisiana, Deacons of Defense. I'll put that in there. And once you do, and you read about the history of this town where I live, I can share with you some other things, but you're exactly right. I grew up in a very segregated town.
Yeah.
They live there.
Yeah.
We live here.
Yeah.
And even into late 80s, it stayed that way.
Yeah.
And I'm old enough that in the 6th grade, they came in at the middle of the year and it said, everybody go home for a week. We're fixing to have full desegregation instead of just 2 per class.
Mm-hmm.
They literally went over and closed a complete high school and an elementary school down.
Yeah.
Like closed it down, shut it down.
Yeah.
And moved everybody over to the high schools and the middle schools and everything. And there was no room for it. We were moving out of rooms. Okay, time for this crew to come in here. All right, y'all go to the lunchroom or y'all go outside. It was absolute chaos. And look, it had been fought for years and it ended dramatically. And that scene repeated itself, not only in the South, by the way, it repeated itself all over this nation, but even up in North. So, but go research that Deacons for Defense, and I can explain a lot more to you. But what's going on right now in this town is that I and others are standing with literally the descendants of those people, and they're fighting against others in this town who want to keep it, not on the white side, want to keep it not because it's black and white, because it's about what? It's about money.
Mm-hmm.
How much money can I fleece from government? And also, this is supposed to get me into trouble. I've got people on the parish level, whether it's in.
Well, now listen, if you,
I don't.
Hold on, because
you're an attorney, But anyway,
I don't want you to inadvertently have like FOIA violations or.
It's not going to be that
or anything like that. So I just want to throw that out there.
I'm going to put it like this, and I'm going to put it like this.
That's my pro bono advice for you.
We're going to be dealing with everybody from the DA's office to the sheriff's office to the state legislative auditor's office. Because the mayor and I just got off the phone. We've had enough.
I dropped some history in the chat for what I think you were talking about. Hopefully that's correct, James.
Well, I don't know if it's correct. It's a lot to it, but I can later on. I'll give y'all some explanation of it. It's very interesting. It really is. And like I said, I grew up in it, and we're still living with the after effects of it. But it's different. It's black and white united against black and white, who white don't care. But it's just like I say, I'd have to really get into names and all of it to explain something, but all we're trying to do on our end is fix the water system, have a decent street, have a well-funded fire department and a police department to keep people safe. That's all we're trying to do. And there's a lot of people who don't want that. They want to suck the money out. And the people who are supposed to be on an authoritative law enforcement prosecution level, they're not doing their job either because they just don't want to fool with it. Because frankly, they're too damn lazy to fool with it, as far as I'm concerned. It's hard stuff, but they won't even do these. Anyway, that's my rant.
Chris, does the Republican Party just simply need courageous local candidates and local representatives to confront and admit and confront the history of redlining and segregationist and racist zoning laws and zoning decisions that were made that create impoverished communities that tend to happen on racial lines? Is that a message that would resonate? And
yeah,
if
it
is.
It is, but the reason it won't happen is that then when black folks say, okay, so what are you going to do about it?
Well, that's the follow-up question, is because I know how land use and zoning works, right? It's, I mean, so the question is, the redlining that happened and the zoning, the racist zoning that has happened in the past leads to infrastructure that's built, expensive infrastructure. We're talking interstates, we're talking exits and on-ramps. So I have in my mind, and I'm not gonna call it out, but I have in my mind a very specific plat that I looked at up in Northern Virginia that had a major interstate running through it and a poor neighborhood right next to it with no exit. And it's like, that's really interesting. I wonder why that neighborhood couldn't grow, right? No, I mean, so I see this. I acknowledge this, fully acknowledge this. I don't think, I would like to say that I am not in the category of Republican that you don't like.
No, you're not sounding like them. You see, the fundamental problem is, in order to see, the Supreme Court basically ruled back in the late 70s when the whole affirmative action debate was posed to the court. There were 4 justices who said that it is okay for the government to make differential treatment for the black group, basically, to make up for what the country did to blacks as a group. 4 other justices said, no, we only deal with fixing past wrongs against individuals, not groups. Black folks are like, well, y'all discriminated against us based on being a group. You discriminate against us based on your 1 drop rule and all this other crazy stuff. But now you want to say, but no, we can't get reparation of any type, redress of any type, affirmative action to fix problems of any type. And Lyndon Johnson had a quote about this too. He said that it was really kind of rich. He didn't use that phrase, but this is his point, that you take a group of people, you shackle them opportunity-wise for hundreds of years, then you take the shackles off, you walk them up to the starting line of the track meet and say, go run against the white boys in a 100-yard dash.
Sure.
We reject that. The Republicans don't want to do anything. They want to say, well, we're not discriminating anymore. But we also know that even pass on whether you want to, fix what you did before, we know there's still stuff happening now. It didn't stop in the 60s. I mean, I've told the story. I overheard bosses of mine at companies I worked for in the 80s when they thought I was off the phone discussing whether to send me to do a project for the white client or not in the 80s. Those people aren't all dead. We know this stuff still happens. Now I want to address James now. I have never said that all white folk are racist. And also, trust me, there's some racist black folk. Although I will say we might have more justification for being somewhat racist because, you know, look at the NFL now. How many quarterbacks are black? But, you know, it took a long time for an NFL team to have a black quarterback because the assumption was, oh, they're not smart enough to read the defenses. That was stated. You know, we were linemen, we were running backs, we were cornerbacks. We couldn't be quarterback. That mindset finally got rooted out in the 80s. So this stuff is still going on. So, James, my point is, I know that there are corrupt black folk and corrupt white folk. There are racist black folk and racist white folk. But I think my issue is there's a lot of, especially on the Republican side, who want to pretend that there's no problems anymore, that there's no racism anymore, and there's nothing that needs to be done to safeguard what happens to black folk in certain situations. The Latinos is where the real improvement in Trump's voting came from. I was the chair of one of the largest Latino organizations in the country for 3 years. I know them well. They don't have the history of black folks in this country. And when they get here, do you know that when asked what race they identify as, 58 of Latinos say white. So they don't consider themselves that aligned with black folk in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a whole set of issues where Latinos and blacks have totally different viewpoints on the history. But, you know, I think there's bad on every side, but there's a reason that, as an example, in Georgia, 88% of black folk voted for one candidate and 70% of white folk voted for the other one.
So, Chris, is the
who
Democrat
cares, Chris?
Party is the Democrat Party not captured by money over a real desire to right the wrongs of the past?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, I mean, I think let me rephrase. Are there any proposals for in the 2025 Democrat Party that are designed to right the wrongs of the past?
Yeah.
That
Voting rights.
That would make a difference.
Yeah, see,
that would
let me
make a
tell
difference.
you, one of the reasons that some of the black folk went over to the Republicans, they were mad at the Democrats for not getting the voting rights stuff passed. But what they don't understand is Manchin, the Republicans blocked it in the Senate. See, some of my people don't understand the mechanisms of government. So they're blaming Biden and Harris for not getting the voting rights legislation passed. What they stupid ones don't understand, some of the ones I talked to in the barbershop, who I try to educate, was that the Republicans blocked it. And some of the Democrats wanted to make an exception for the filibuster rule so you wouldn't have to get 60 votes. But they needed Manchin and Sinema to vote for that. And Manchin and Sinema wouldn't do it, which basically meant that even though the Democrats...
Joshua, okay, we need to move on to other people now.
That's fine.
You've asked a lot of questions. Raul has had his hand up for a while, and Farrell needs to go next.
I'll pass it off to Farrell, and then I'll if I can go after Farrell, that's cool.
Quick question, and I'm not trying to be an antagonist. I'm just asking a serious question, Chris. To you, Chris. What do you think about and I'm sorry, I just jumped back in. I had some chores around the house to do. So I jumped back in, and I don't know if it's been covered or not. Honestly, Chris, what do you think about the voter ID laws and all that? Some people are saying it's racist. Some people, I want to know, honestly, your honest opinion.
The motivations are definitely racist from the Republican Party.
Okay.
Definitely racist. Now, they may, again, whenever people go out and actually see how much fraud and bad voting is going on, they don't find any. Even Raffensperger, the Republican guy in Georgia, said that this is not an issue. But guess what the Republicans in Georgia did after the re-election when he said that? They went and put all kinds of new stuff on because there are some behaviors in the Black community that don't line up with all this paperwork and what, and you can say whatever you want about that. But I know, and most Black Democrats know, the motivation is to suppress the Black vote, pure and simple.
What is voter ID?
You don't. Oh, well, a lot of states we're totally not requiring ID at all to vote. And so, well, probably what 8, 10 states right now. Most of them Democratic. Most of them Democratic.
I've never seen. Chris just said it's definitely racist. It's not, as far as I'm concerned. We just disagree. But here's what every quote voter ID proposal I have seen says: you are who you say you are, and you live where you say you live. That, for some reason, is a problem with a lot of people, not just Blacks. But it's turned on where you're putting this restriction and you're suppressing this. I know the difference between where I live and where I stay. I know that difference. So all these other things that people say that, what? You can prove who you say you are. If you've got an ID, whether it's a state issued ID, whether it's a driver's license, whatever it is, that says, this is who I am, and this is where I live. This is my address, because your address matters, okay? That's it. You are who you say you are, and you live where you say you live. And you're 18 years old. Are there other restrictions? Yeah, if you're a felon, you can't vote. We can deal with all of that, and that is being dealt with. But beyond that, I don't know what the quote suppression is. It sounds good.
Hey, Google it.
Out there. It sounds good.
James,
So what is
Google it, and you'll be reading a while.
Tell me what it is. Sum it up for me. Tell me.
I'll give you one. I'll give you one of the most ridiculous ones. You can't pass out water in the voting line in Georgia. What the hell is that about?
That kind of stuff is ridiculous. I do agree with that.
So what's it about? It's an attempt to make it harder. Oh, yeah. In Texas, at one point in the election process, they, in the county where Houston is, they put out X number of.
Lost Chris.
Wasn't me. Wasn't me.
You didn't kick him off, James? Be sure to admit him when he re-enters.
You're host. I'm host. You made me host again. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, because you were asking for it. So yeah, I made you host.
Isn't that me always asking for it? Well, Chris isn't here. Okay, Michael, you were gonna say something.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well,
I gotta run. See you guys.
Peace.
Okay.
If this might kind of tee him up in a minute if he comes back on, but okay, I don't know if you guys were following along on two-way, but Mark, toward the end of the election, I'll have to track down the YouTube video. He talked about there's 3 things that you have happen during an election. You have voter, you get out the vote, and then you suppress the vote for your opponent. I can't remember the third thing, but anyway, kind of find maybe a middle ground. Why it can be harder or more burdensome, and let's just take race out of it. If you're poor and you live in, from my perspective, helping on get a lot of school board people elected. The problem is that some school board, some schools, districts have their good end where you have all the stable, everybody's got an address and they pay their taxes and yada, yada, yada. And then you have other schools in the district that will serve the lower economic side of the house. And what will happen, they call them itinerant students or itinerant parents that they just, for whatever reason, they fall through on their apartment lease or whatever it is. And then they just move on as best they can. And it's harder for those folks to have all their papers in order. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying it's a fact of life. If you have kids and you're an itinerant parent or family, you're going to be moving around a lot. So your kids are the whole economic thing, you know, this whole stability that we all take for granted or whatever, you know, is undermines the whole. I'm not saying that's an excuse. I'm just saying
I know of
it's a
schools.
fact, you know.
I know of schools, especially not as much around here. We're a small town, but I know of schools in larger cities, Monroe, Shreveport, where principals would tell me that if they started off with 400 kids in September, that the 400 kids they ended with in May at the end of the school year, 100 to 150 of them were new. It's itinerant, it's transient. That can add a burden to getting properly registered to vote, but you still have to go register to vote.
Well,
no one's stopping anybody from registering to vote.
Well, the other thing I would add on to that, COVID, nobody talks about this, but it's true. During COVID, everybody in America realized how much our public schools are not just schools. They're community centers in a lot of ways.
They are.
Because people rely on them for lack of a better anything else. And when that whole thing, well, we all saw what happened. When you disrupt the system like that, it screws everything up. But that's just like one small thing. But it's really hard if you don't have a reliable voting base or even a budgetary local, tax revenue, you're dying. So unless you get a pick me up from the state, which you can do. But
anyway, the 2020 census was one of the worst against just about everybody. It was just so incorrect in so many places. The firm that we had do it here, which I didn't want and other people didn't want, but we hired them. I'm a small town. I got 4,500 people. I've got 1,500 to 1,700 people registered to vote. Guy comes out with a plan, and I said, "Hey, you've left off an entire part of my district and a little bit part of this other guy's district." Oh, I wasn't aware of that. I said, "But don't you have the same amount of people on road?" I said, "That's because you took a prison that's in my district and you counted all those people." So incompetent. It was stunning. And he produced big charts on this. And a man literally got mad at me because I pointed, "Sorry, you've left off entire neighborhoods. Dude, we're paying you $15,000 to do this. Pay me $500 and I'll do it better." But I heard that all through Louisiana. And I think that was nationwide. That 2020 census was going to be really difficult to take. They should have stopped it when COVID went. They should have stopped the census.
Well, like I think school districts every once in a while have to do the data thing, and they'll hire a demographer that will come on board, and then they'll give them projections for high, low, medium, for what they can project out or whatever. But and then because Chris didn't hear this, going back to the voter suppression thing. I don't know, maybe you remember this, Chris, or not, but toward the end of the election, Mark actually they talked the inside baseball strategy and how those things work. And there were three things that they mentioned that Mark's theory of how elections work, whatever, was basically you got to get out the vote for your side. You got to suppress the vote for the others, for the opposite side, for your opponent. And I can't remember the third one, but he talked about that very openly as strategy and tactics for like how elections work. So both sides engage in both of these behaviors, because obviously, if you're on the margins, regardless of whether you're red or blue, you don't want the other side to be mobilized to come out and vote against your platform or your whatever. But
Professor Kenny's had his hand up for a while, and then Chris will give
Yeah, I wanted Chris to finish what he was saying, then I'll jump in, because Chris was right on the cusp of something I was interested in, and then we lost him. And, so after he's done, if you can remember what you were talking about, Chris.
Well, no, I mean, I was just saying, if you look at states where the legislature is controlled by Republicans, like in Texas. That's what I was about to make the point. They had X number of drop-off boxes in the county where Houston is, and then the Republican governmental structure, severely reduced the number of those drop-off. They claimed it was to enhance security, but when challenged about it, they couldn't produce a bunch of examples of tampering. The real goal was make it harder for folk to drop their vote off places. I mean, yeah, you can say box stuffing, but they couldn't find a bunch of evidence that there was fraudulent box stuffing going on. But what they ended up doing was removing a bunch of them, so people had to drive much further away to do stuff. And just look at Georgia, Tennessee. See, Alabama and Mississippi don't have to engage in it as much because those elections aren't going to be close. But in places like Texas and other places where the Republicans have the legislature and they care about the outcome of the elections, they have meetings on voter suppression.
They do what?
Yeah,
They
so
have meetings to discuss strategy on voter suppression.
well, that's my
And
my
what,
my
and what are they discussing?
What new regulations to put in place that James or Jim don't say they are directed at black folk, but they've done their homework to know that the disproportionate impact will be on the black voters.
Well, I need to call my Republican governor and my Republican attorney general and tell them that they missed that meeting when they sat there and agreed to that new district that was created due to the census, due to reinforcement, that got argued 3 weeks ago, that they argued on behalf of, not against, on behalf of, in the Supreme Court. And that thing's probably going to get kicked out. That district's probably going to get kicked out. So,
but you agree that that's a rarity in the South.
What do you mean, rarity?
That a white dominated governmental structure bends over backwards to give more representation for black voters, because they just had the case at the Supreme Court, I think you're aware, where they forced Mississippi or Alabama, I forget which one it was, to give a second congressional district because they had gerrymandered in such a way that even though it was like, I don't know, 30% black population, they only had 1 out of 8 congressional seats or something like that.
Well, that's why the state of Louisiana did what they did, because they did have that case in Alabama.
Exactly. So what you're telling me is
that
your people were afraid that the court was going to rule against the white folk like they did in Alabama.
They're going to end up ruling against that district because, unfortunately, we cannot force people to live where they want to live. That's why if you go look it up, you talk about Google, go look it up, go look at this district that's created, in which 25 years later, I've talked about this before, 25 years later, they reelected a guy, Cleo the Bagman Fields, is a congressman in that district that snakes up from below Baton Rouge, snakes up along the Red River, comes up through central Louisiana, comes all the way up, picks up a little part of Shreveport. It's the craziest district. That's the one that's challenged. It's probably going to get kicked out because that's the only way they could balance it out. Because yes, we have a population in this state. We have 6 congressmen. 1/3 of the population is black, a little bit less than a third. So the case can easily be made. You should have 2 out of 6.
Right.
But I cannot help. But the Supreme Court also says, 1, you cannot create districts that do what that district did, which is based upon race. And they also talk about how districts have to be somewhat compact. That's probably why that district's going to get kicked out. I can't help if people want to live where they want to live.
Okay,
I mean, it's crazy.
Let's give
Yeah, okay,
Professor
okay,
Kenny
James, let's
and
let
then Brett.
Professor Kenny finish what he was
Okay.
asking.
All right, so this thing always fascinates me, this voter ID thing, because I just don't understand the idea of not having voter ID, and I'm very opposed to mail-in voting too, aside from if you're overseas military. I just think it's the chance of fraud is just so much higher. But to be fair, also, when you go to your polling place to vote, it isn't, like in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, right? When I go vote, who's manning the tables? Like when you got to go find out where, when you got to check in, they got to check your voter list, So who are those people at the table? Elderly women who are volunteers, right? Not that I'm trying to be ageism or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? Like I could just say, yeah, that's me. Like, you know what I mean? Like I showed my ID, whatever, but anybody could just flick an ID in front of somebody and just walk away. But and be, go vote, but the idea of being able to go somewhere and vote for somebody who's going to make decisions on everybody in your community, and you don't have to produce an ID for that vote, to me is utterly ridiculous. And we can talk about suppression or whatever, like Michael brought up before you said it, Chris. Mike brought it up. He was like, "Look, both parties have campaign strategies about how we can suppress the other side." You know what I mean? So that's been going on forever. I'm sure there are cases because it was easier to, because the black people didn't have the right to vote for God knows how many years, and it's only been recent, right? And since the 60s, right? That, they found it easier to suppress the vote. And that, I don't want to get into the history of that. That's really if you think about it, it's a Southern thing. You know what I mean? So,
No, not just a Southern thing.
yeah, but it's predominantly a Southern thing, and because where we, look at the population and look at the demographics, but the idea of people not presenting, not like, well, I don't drive. Well, go get a state ID.
State ID.
And they said, well, I don't want to go through the bureaucracy. Nobody wants to go through bureaucracy, but if you want to fucking vote, you better have an ID. It's important. And that's my argument. It's just we can't have these. I don't like to stand in line for an hour and a half. Or how could they not give water? Well, I think Luke brought it up. The reason why I didn't do the water thing, they lost the shit because it was a candidate or somebody representing a candidate handing out the water. So that was the problem with that, which I still think not being able to get water, making a law like that is kind of ridiculous. But, they need to just have people online, officiating that, whatever. You just don't want to influence. But the idea that you can just vote and not present any idea is to me utterly ridiculous. It doesn't make sense to me. Somebody explain it to me. Okay.
Well, go ahead. I don't have my hand up.
I was going to say, I just moved here from northern Indiana from Florida. Thank God, because it's freezing cold up here. It's absolutely ridiculous right now. But no, I was a first time voter this year. And you go in, scan, you walk in, scan ID. I voted early too. They started 2 weeks early. Go in, boom, scan ID, and you're out. And you can get a state ID. And I know some places you can't have state ID and a driver's license, which is weird to me. But I thought it was very quick. I think the whole nation should look at Florida's process, because you see how quick their returns are in on election day. And I mean, it's like lightning.
It is.
Everybody said, everybody wants to say what they want to say about Ron DeSantis. But I lived there for 10 years, and that guy he's a little quirky at times. He's out there in the tall white boots over his jeans and a hurricane. And, he had some awkward photo ops, and he makes awkward smiles, but he was, in my opinion, one of the best governors in the country. The way he reacted to all the hurricanes, everything going on down there, he was on it, and his team was on it. And the way they handled voting and
COVID,
everything, COVID especially. Yeah, I was a restaurant manager. You know what I mean? That was big for the restaurant industry down there. So I think he did a fantastic job. I really liked it. I hated moving up here, but then I looked into the governor up here, and he seems to be the new governor in Indiana.
The new governor.
Yeah, he seems to be like he's going to be on it too. So I'm not too sad about it. Just the weather and the lack of being able to golf year round. That's it. As I was saying, I just wanted to bring up, like, I think every state should look at what Florida does. and kind of mirror them because they get everything in so quickly and it seems to be accurate. And that's all.
Okay, Mike, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just say voter suppression, it occurs in all 50 states. They all have their own that's what redistricting is. And then you get something like where it goes on for too long, like Missouri. Missouri's red as red can be. It's only gotten redder. And then we have our jackass state GOP play Mickey Mouse games with the border with the things. Some of it isn't, most of it is they do what they want. They ignore the will of the people all the time. Like if there's a ballot measure that goes through that Missourians pass, they will slow walk that damn thing to stop it, especially if it's more and more popular, something that Democrats and Republicans in the younger generation would agree on. I was going to say that. And then so they both, that's what they all do. They all do. And I was going to say it for voting models, we have 50 different, actually more than 50 if you count our territories, ways of doing our election or local elections. Oregon, I'm not saying it's good or bad. Oregon probably is the best state in America when it comes to mail-in voting because it's automatic. Every time you come to the DMV, I believe that it's automatic. It automatically gets sent to you. Matter of fact, I think you have to send paperwork back saying, I don't want this. I want the normal way, I believe. It's been a minute since I've read up on those laws, but then you have the way that Florida does it. You have the way goofy ass way California does it, like where they just take their sweet time. I don't have any answers, but yeah, like to say that it's not just one side I'm not making excuses for previous wrongs, but it unfortunately it's about power, and a blue state wants to keep its blue. I want to keep it blue. Red state wants to keep it red. Purple. Arizona is crazy, crazy. Then you get wackadoodle Kari Lake or whatever, who's a loser. And then she pulls up on Katie Porter and goes, "I'm just not going to debate you." This is a tangent here, I guess, more than and all.
But Michael, just 1 second. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Alan, before you leave, did you want to say anything?
No, I was telling Professor Kenny to have a great weekend. I'm not leaving yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Mike,
No
continue.
worries.
I'm reading it wrong. I'm multitasking. My bad.
I should have responded to Professor Kenny directly. My bad.
It's okay.
My bad. Sorry to
Okay,
interrupt.
continue, Mike. My
I
bad.
didn't really have anything other than that. Just that I had a point related to kind of the thing that we were talking about before with the thing, but I can't fucking remember it for the life of me. So
Okay. I guess then you can go if you did have a question, Alan, because you had your hand up.
No, I just want to comment on Pharrell's point about Florida. I mean, I live here, and we get our voting results like quick. Like we're talking about results, and Mike's point about like Arizona being goofy. Like I don't. Florida's one of the most popular. Has one of the highest populations in the country, and we get our voting done by 10 p.m. because we have the panhandle to count votes in on Central Time, and it just doesn't in the most advanced country in the world doesn't make sense to me that California was still counting votes in December. Arizona can't get their votes counted. I mean, California has an excuse. They have the most population, but I mean, there needs to be some sort of consistency because, how can we say we can't have our presidential elections or any election figured out 2 months after, a month, 2 months after it happened? So, that's something that rubs me the wrong way. And then with voter ID, it's something that needs, Professor Kenny mentioned the handing out water. That's stupid. Why are you putting that into a bill? Like if a Democrat person gives me water while I'm standing in line waiting to vote, it's not going to influence who I'm voting for. It's silly. Like stick to the basics of it. Like James was saying, you have an ID. This is who you are. This is where you live. You're voting in the right district. no one should have a problem with that aspect of it. It's like when you get off the rails of the two main points of what voter ID is trying to accomplish, making sure the right person is voting, so we don't have these possibility of, and it's not so much what can be, I don't want to go off on election conspiracies, but there needs to be the appearance of a free election with no interference. Whether there's interference, whether there's not interference, that's not the debate of it. There needs to be this is the election, it's 100%, this is who you are, this is who you voted for. So I'll get off my little soapbox and cede my time to everyone else.
Okay. No, you're fine, Alan. James, you're next.
Now, I just thought about Ron DeSantis, who I'm a big fan of. If Ron DeSantis was president up there right now, he would be doing almost exactly the same thing just going on as far as policy. He would be doing more of it, and there wouldn't be any trouble with messaging. He would come out every day and he would just lay it out. I really wish the guy was president. I really do, but maybe down the road, who knows? Voter suppression can be as simple as, I can't believe you're going to vote for that candidate. Just because he stopped beating his wife doesn't mean he's the right person. I mean, those kind of tactics and stuff have been going on forever. And we have trouble with, and if you look every year, you'll see it pop up. It can be local. It can literally be on a federal level, particularly on state level, but more local level and state level, of the person who got elected to a position, and then they end up having to leave office because why? Because they didn't actually live in the district they were elected in. That happens more often than not. So there's a reason people fool around with these addresses sometimes. It's not totally innocent. Yeah, there's problem with the transits and all that transient population, but still, I think today, I can't say for always, but today, registering to vote, there's many ways to do it. There's many ways to correct it. There's many ways it can be done. But people still have to kind of take just a little bit of initiative to make sure that where they're voting is where they're supposed to be voting. I know many people who work at our polls down here, and every election, it can be this, they end up having a few issues here and there. Not many, frankly, but they'll have someone comes in and says, well, I think I'm supposed to vote here. Well, I know you think you are, but here's the book, and this is the book that counts. You're not on it. And what happened to them? They didn't go in and make the change they were supposed to make. They have an old voter registration card. Your driver's license doesn't match up to that address you have now. That's personal initiative. They got to take care of that themselves. And it's easy for them to do. They just don't want to do it sometimes. And when it comes to elections, I think we got better elections than we've ever had. They're never going to be perfect because, just as Michael said, people are going to work to elect their candidate, promote their party and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean it's, quote, voter suppression. That label sets me off, as you can see, because it's often used one way. And I don't like that one way that it's used. I had a grandmother we used to take down to vote in a little old voting booth. She lived here in town, but she voted all her life 10 miles from here in the little community she grew up in. And she always voted as long as she could. If I had to drive her down there, and I often asked her, I said, why don't you change you live in town here. Why don't you? Well, this is where I've always voted. That's where and she was allowed to do that. She couldn't do that today, but that was, 40 years ago. So, and I also know what street money is. Go look that term up. I know what street money is, and it matters. So, hey, I got to run. I appreciate y'all's indulgence today, and I wish I could share more about what we're going through, but it's interesting. But it's also
thank you for attending, James.
It's quite maddening too, as you can see. So y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you for attending, James. Farrell, you're next.
One more thought, and then I'm going to jump off too. Just it seems like they just don't like we bring up California and there's too many people there. It seems like they just don't want to fix the problem. You know what I mean? Like you could, it's just stupid old me who knows nothing. It seems like you could, if you got too many people, you could break that state up into 20 districts or something like that. You know what I mean? And have 20 different places where, however many counties report to, one place or 5. Do you understand what I'm saying? You could go, okay, this northern section here, these counties, this is the person in charge of, collecting all these votes, and then go down the state as it is. It just seems like they don't want to fix the problem. It's just ridiculous. California is just, I don't know what they're doing over there, but it just seems like they don't want to fix it.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was just gonna say 2 quick things. I'm sorry James left before I had a chance to say it, but one of the reasons that especially blacks in the South are skeptical of this flurry of voting laws that the Republicans came up with after the 2020 election is that we think these are the same people who used to make black folk, recite the Constitution of the state when they tried to sign up to vote or tell how many jelly beans were in a jar. Like, nah, we don't trust y'all. Sorry. Number one. Number two, I think there was a lot of thinking on the Republican side after the 2020 election that all the mail-in balloting, because of COVID and all the other measures that were put in place to make it easier for people to vote and not have to congregate, drove up turnout in ways that didn't benefit them. And that Freedom to Vote Act that Klobuchar put in place that tried to make mail-in voting more accessible around the country, that no longer require you to have a witness in some states to send your ballot in if it was remotely delivered, based on the premise that very few people are willing to go to jail to vote, when a third of folk don't vote at all. There was a lot of stuff in that Freedom to Vote Act that Klobuchar proposed that was DOA because the Republicans opposed it, that she wasn't saying you didn't need to show voter ID. She was saying you don't need all these other restrictions and complications related to voting, and the number of polling places had to be near major transportation hubs. It was all designed to increase turnout. The Republicans don't like more turnout. That's a fact. And I don't care if that fact upsets some people. That's a fact.
No, I get that. I was just gonna share share my screen. A tweet that I saw from Harry Inton of CNN. I'll try to get the right size here so it's not like super ass tiny. I don't think it'll play the sound, but it's interesting. Let me see if I do this right. There it is. Sure. Yeah, I'm not gonna play the audio or whatever, but it's just something that came out. Like, I wish this is not a thing. I keep saying it, but it hasn't been picked up by the major party or by MAGA or what I wish it was. The realignment coalition that happened. The more working class came over and voted for Trump and the GOP than they did. And now this is a really big unique thing that he's talking about. He said that a shocker for me, given the tariff war, the GOP seems to be in their best position ever for the party who cares more about the needs of people like yourself. A tie on the metric that Dems have historically led by double digits. The reason, huge GOP gains among the working class. That is substantial, in my opinion. That's just something that would have been unheard of. Working class and then GOP get lost. No, the unions are on the Democrat side. So, again, there's a lot in play here between now and the midterms, but if they can continue to skate along like that and improve those numbers, they're not going to have as bad of a normal time the GOP does when their president is in power. Yeah, especially somebody like Trump, who's just he just naturally stokes resistance to him. We kind of all saw that resistance is out there, but it's just not quite as well tuned. Anyway, that's all I had.
Michael, it's clearly like in the case of Georgia, which is a good example because it's an important swing state. It must really be the white working class because only 12% of blacks in Georgia voted for the Republicans.
Yeah, I didn't have any breakdown. Anyway, Alan.
No, I know you didn't, but I'm just saying, just logically, it has to be the white working class, not the black working class.
I know, and we kind of went back and forth with this before the election or whatever. And my argument is he doesn't have to get everyone; he just has to get enough. So whether they're white working class or black or Hispanic or whatever,
Oh yeah.
he all he has got to do is get. But the problem though is somehow Trump has got to graft the messaging and the story, which he sucks at doing this part. He really sucks at building party unity. You know what I mean? Like whenever Trump's not on the ballot, it's not a cakewalk for the GOP. So like that's the, who knows what'll happen. But anyway, go ahead, Alan.
No, I saw that. I saw that on my feed with Harry Anton, and like he's a numbers guy, and like I know Chris, you brought up like it's not 100% of the working classes might not include that demographic of the black working class, but like where you were talking earlier, like it's about the essentially election is the math at the end of the day. It's about the margins, like Mike's point. If the more he chips away at that like 2 to 12%, it could move the margins in his favor. And then there was another.
It did.
There's another the other point I want to bring up. I talked about this last night. I'm looking forward to Bill Maher tonight and talking about his dinner with Trump, and just to see where he lands on. I mean, I'm not thinking it's going to be anything favorable. I love Bill Maher. I love hearing his opinion on things, but it's going to be it's 10 o'clock tonight on his on real time. I'm very looking forward to just hearing his insights on having some one-on-one time with the President of the United States.
Yeah, I think he's funny. I remember being on the opposite end of everything Bill Maher ever was for, like back in the OOs and whatever. He's very entertaining for me, and I know he's like a new pet. He's a new pet favorite of the right in some circles, which is what it is. But
I've been watching him since he was on Politically Incorrect. I loved his show. I love that he had people from opposite ends of the spectrum. I thought he got a raw deal when he was canceled essentially for making a comment about 9/11. They ended that show, and
I think Politically Incorrect was a better show than what he's got now. But that's
no, it was a much better show than what he's got now. But Riley, keep going. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, that's all I had to say.
I'm trying to switch gears a little bit too. That's why I brought up Bill Maher too, and I always love hearing Chris's perspective on things. It's always informative and always thought-provoking as well.
Yeah,
I'm kind of known for that.
I got till 12:30, and then I think we'll wrap up maybe here, or maybe a little sooner if we're running out of gas. But I think the only thing that we hadn't really talked about for the race thing, Chris, are you familiar with ADOS?
American in the tech world.
No. It's a weirdo small offshoot in some black organizing circles where they American descendants of slavery, where they say like if there's a reparations or something like that, then it would be there. It should only ever go to black people who actually had direct lineage, so that you would have to prove. Anyway, if you take that as a natural thought experiment, what's very interesting, I just think this is just interesting conversation. Maybe it'll go nowhere, but if that was, let's just assume thought experiment time that it would go or pass something. I think what a
Sure.
lot of people would see is that it wouldn't just go to black people. Would just go to black folk. It would go to a lot of people that look different because if you trace the lineage from who, families, you would really see you would have white folks that would get that, presumably because of the, if you follow the structure versus like say somebody like Kamala coming in, who is black but doesn't have that lineage of, like maybe that's a poor example, but I think you get what I'm saying. And just curious if you'd ever heard that or roll
No,
or,
yeah,
or
I've
just
heard of
curious.
that theory. So I put it this way. Even in today's society, most people live their lives for the most part within their racial pattern. Most people do. And so the person most likely to go tell an inner city black kid, okay, like, I worked in banking, but not like retail teller banking. I did billion-dollar transactions. So I go give a speech at a black elementary school back in 1980. Who's more likely to go over and talk to some black kids about that kind of banking career versus the only kind of banker they've ever seen at a teller? It's not you guys, it's me. I'm more likely to go do that because that's my community. So one of the reasons that we believe in affirmative action is so that more blacks get access to worlds that blacks never saw. So then the current blacks can go tell the other current younger blacks, hey, you could do this, but you got to study. You can do this, but you got to prepare for it. Don't think you can only do that, or whatever. So it won't be monetary reparations anyway. It'll be opportunity access type reparations, which is why I don't. But I do kind of agree. I think it should be like, what has your experience been? Now I'll give you an example. At a company I once worked for, and I've worked for several, so I won't say which one because they wouldn't want me telling this. This company had a program for Latinos. I was working on to like give them, not like promote unqualified ones, but in a situation where you were going to promote 20 people out of a pool of 50, and there was one Latino in the pool and he was qualified, maybe he would get the last slot before the 20th white guy got the slot. That's the kind of affirmative action, right? Well, this Latino guy, look as white as any of you. He shows up on the list for the Latino program. I knew him. I hang out with Latinos all the time. I'm going to a Latin club tomorrow night and dance salsa, merengue, and bachata. I can speak some Spanish. I asked this guy, I said, why is your, oh, because my mother's Venezuelan and da 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 da. I said, do you hang out with Latinos at all? No. Do you speak Spanish? No. I asked him, could he do the dances? No. I said, well, then you're not going to be in this program because you're not going to help solve the problem, which is to raise up your group that was historically suppressed, right? So, so for me, it's like, what's your connection to it? Which is why I will tell you, a few years ago, there was a big outcry at Harvard amongst the black alums, and it's still an issue because a very high percentage of the blacks at Harvard are Africans, many of whom feel zero, if not negative, connection to the African American history of this country. And brothers from Memphis and Detroit are like, no, 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 no. You need to be given, if you're going to give any preferential treatment, give it to somebody who actually might go down to Mississippi. And the guy who wrote they wrote the book about Just Mercy, the guy who's been defending black death row folk in Alabama ever since he got out of Harvard Law School. That's who should get that spot, not some guy who comes over here from some other country, couldn't care less about the black community in America. So no, I understand their concept, and there's a lot of, I have a lot of sympathy for it, you know, depending on how it plays out.
Yeah, I of similar mind. I think that it's a conversation at the very bare minimum should be had. I don't know, but there. I mean, I can't speak for. I'm not black, but I have also seen that the black community, like when they're just trying to focus on just everyday, things that will help improve things or longer term things. Have you seen that there is a schism between like when the LGBTQ comes to the door, and then it's the thing that have you seen any kind of a conflict? Because I have, I mean, anecdotally, because they don't like it. They don't want these people coming in and talking for them because they're like, listen, and I agree with them. Like we're trying to fix all these other issues, and then you guys are over here trying to do all this other bullshit.
So let me tell you why I'm laughing. And again, I don't like to tell everything about me all the time, but if you Google me, despite the fact that I spent most of my career running deals and doing finance, for 3 years, I ran one of the most successful DEI programs in the Fortune 500. I won every award there is to win in America, in part because I didn't do it the standard way. The first thing I said at my company was, I don't blame the white boys. I blame everybody, and I called out everybody's bias. And one of the first biases I called out was I told the black folk, how dare you want to complain about white folk discriminating against you when in black churches on Sunday, y'all all know that we got black ministers railing against the gay lesbian community and saying they all going to hell, blah, blah, blah. And I told them, if you want me to talk to the white guys about what they're doing to you, I better see you at my gay lesbian event next week. So I'm totally with you on that. It's completely hypocritical. Completely.
That's cool.
And in fact, the first thing I did when I got put in charge of this diversity program was I told the leadership that we were going to stop being a punk organization because we hadn't been saying anything about gay lesbian rights. And a very senior person said to me, oh, Chris, I'm not sure if the rest of the leadership around the country is ready for that yet. And I said, well, if guys at your level at firms of our stature wait for the rank and file leader to tell you when it's time to do the right thing, I said, then I guess black guys like me will still be picking cotton in Mississippi. At which point, he never said anything against my gay lesbian program again. And I had like 13 fairly.
Oh, what the hell? I did not do that.
He keeps losing his connection. He's been having some issues with his connection.
Get his Wi-Fi. I might have to make an emergency trip over to Atlanta and be like, we need to fix your shit.
I've offered. I said that I texted him and I said that, Chris, if you're having an issue, we can help you. He might sign back on in a minute, and you'll have to admit him.
I'm looking out. I got the thing open so I can guard against the
Yeah, I mean, if anybody else here, but yeah, he's been having issues all week, and he's been coming on and off. It's just today is the first day that he's been dropping off while he's talking. Most of the time, he's not talking when he gets dropped off.
Yeah.
Like I see it happen, and he says, I keep getting signed off, and he even asked us if any of the rest of us were having issues.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the thing.
I'm having issues, but I'm like half the world away. So
yeah, that might be different, Luke. Yeah,
Luke, you're in the future, right? You're ahead of us. You're a day ahead.
Yeah, it's Saturday here. I'm sorry. But my weekend's already started.
Sorry, boy. You partying?
All right, Chris is coming up live here. Hopefully he'll come up hot, and then he can continue
I was having a connectivity problem.
Yeah.
I was about. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. You're good. Keep rolling. Keep rolling.
Yeah, what I was saying was I sent out a note to management level people throughout my entire company, of which there were 2,000. And I said, we're going to have a meeting in New York if you're a gay lesbian management person. 14 people showed up. The first thing they wanted to know was, this is a private meeting, right? Nobody knows we're here, because they were scared for people to find out they were gay or lesbian. A year later, because I got leadership to so aggressively tell everybody else, you're either going to support gays and lesbians or we're going to run your butt off. I got those same 14 people to put their full identities on the company website. So now I'm a big champion for that. And Michael, you can tell you hit on one of my.
What?
Yeah, you
Everybody
hit
here?
on one of my hot buttons with that one. Yeah, the hypocrisy. In fact, I went to a funeral at my father was a Baptist minister. I went to a funeral at his church, and the visiting minister started railing on the gay lesbian stuff. And I stood up and said, you need to sit down and be quiet. And my father was not happy with me, by the way. Because, I wasn't a big churchgoer. He was the minister. But I'm like, we can't tolerate this stuff hiding behind the Bible,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's an issue. I think it's gotten better.
Yeah. I mean, I've only observations for certain interactions on social media, so you gotta take those with a grain of with a boulder of salt sometimes. But it's just interesting. Oh, you can't hear me? Oh God, you can't.
Michael?
There we go. Now, hopefully now.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I didn't have anything else, but all those kind of interactions I saw like on social media, and just I take it with a boulder of salt, obviously, but
I mean, every group has its hypocritical idiosyncrasies. Like I have a very good Jewish friend.
Yeah.
And he made a comment about women one night. And I said to him, hey, so-and-so, how would you feel if I took women out of the statement you just made and inserted Jewish? And, he kind of had to catch himself. Yeah, we carry around a lot of stuff.
Well, gentlemen, does anybody else want to bring anything to the floor or ask Chris? This is the question-orama. So God bless Chris for having the patience to field all our questions.
Well, Michael, a lot of people, I've had Black folks say to me, why white folk always ask me my opinion about Black stuff. I said, because you might be the only one they feel comfortable asking. So tell them what you think, and give them multiple viewpoints that you know of within the Black community. But that's been one of my pet peeves with certain Black folk who get worked up because some white person asked them something about Black stuff. Well, you're more likely to know than they are. Maybe they want your perspective. I'm going to ask a Jewish person about Jewish stuff. I'm going to ask a Latino about Latino stuff. I don't know why people, I think part of it is that there's some things that we think that we know some people don't want to hear. And so in order to keep the peace, they just don't want to be asked. Whereas I'm like, I'm going to tell you what I think. I know you might not agree. We could still, have a conversation about this stuff. But, a lot of folks are look at what's happening on Halpern's call. Look at all the Democrats who basically run off to the
gone.
Yeah, they're like, we can't handle it.
And they're gone.
Well, I think it's just that there's a fear that, we want to have some respect and some understanding, and sometimes the truth doesn't really fit with what they want, and so they have a fear that if they're wrong, that they are possibly being disrespected, or that they won't get the respect they have because they're wrong. And so it's a difficult choice to come here and talk about these things. It's one of the things that we have to kind of face as a nation, because I mean, this is one of those things, like we're a nation of multi different cultures, and we're going to have to figure all of this stuff out if we're going to really get things moving in this country. And that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like I want to get past this racism stuff, and I'm like, I want to get through this, and let's get into things that like I don't know if we can, because there are people who just don't want to.
Well, and that's on top of everybody else worrying about, you know, putting food on the table and, you know, or just having a bad day and being pissed off. Normal people, things that don't care about politics or want to engage in it. It is unfortunately normies. Why the hell did it do that? Unfortunately, normies are going to avoid if there's a big knife fight or a big brawl down the road or down the street from you, you're not walking toward it. You're walking away. So they see, everybody else sees all these jackasses having a knife fight in the street. You know, I'm metaphorical here, not literally, but you know, the normies don't want to deal with, you know, the thing. That's assuming they even give a shit to vote in the first place. Like, I do think though, maybe a positive aspect of things being a little bit more divisive is it forces the parties to turn people out. So you have record-setting votes, or hopefully record-setting numbers of voters. You know, we had a high watermark in 2020. No matter who you think won or lost or whatever, it was I think the most people ever voted in United States history for 2020, and 2024 was a little bit more in line with whatever. But you know, I'm not going to get into whose side turned out more or whatever, but we all saw doesn't matter. But that engagement is important, and people see a knife fight go, you know, they don't want anything to do with it. They don't know what the hell these people are doing. But it's just interesting. Anybody else?
But then there's also people who like they really want to. They have such strong issues with people. They just want to add people to their count so that they can feel that their part is normalized and that it's fine for them to feel angry about this one thing. And that's a problem that both sides have.
Well,
I worry about that as well.
Yeah, well, they're expert knee-jerk people, right? Like the attention economy, all the it's horrible. Like the grifters and the graft that they do just to get eyeballs on their horse shit, or to sell you more T-shirts from the trunk of their car on the side of the road for their stupid YouTube channel, or all that stuff would be nice to have. But the really good ones, the sincere people like the Mark Halperins, the Sean Spicers, the Chris Simmons, you know, of the world, hopefully will rise, you know, that have actually something substantial to say than on just another fucking conspiracy theory or some here is my updated programming of why I have to hate this person or this thing, you know, that goes about, because that stuff is copycat. People copycat that. They mean that's what they don't read the article and they copycat. You know, it's just like the jackass. What was it? Was some kind of a murder happened or something. And the rightosphere wouldn't shut the fuck up about it. Like because they kept sharing it out, and it's like, you know, you're not sharing this out so people know. You're sharing it out so you get more eyeballs on the thing. And when are we going to have responsibility to, like, where if you keep pumping this up, I really wish I could remember the details, but it was like really recent, and it's like you keep bringing this shit up, and it keeps it people will copycat things that they see, you know. You know, I'm not saying you can't talk about it or whatever, but like, you know, this that kind of shit drives me nuts. But if it bleeds, it leads, you know, or if it's controversial, oh well, it's my faction versus your faction, you know, or you're you know, whatever. But I don't have any answers, but I'm just rambling.
Well, I mean, we see that in sports. I mean, sports is a really good example of it. Like people voting for one team and the arguments and the fights behind it. It's just, it's something that I think is very interesting about America is that, and I think a lot of people here in China just don't quite understand. It's like how we as a group can get along with each other, even though we are so different. And I find it fascinating for them because they always think, it's funny. I have one of my friends is like super into Black culture, and it's just kind of funny that he's got such a basic novel ideal about Black culture, and it's quite funny to see how they try to understand how America works culturally. And that's what's so great about I just love America. And it's I always get saddened when people yell at me about living in China and say that I'm a communist or something like that. So oh well.
Real
None
quick,
of us think
like,
you're a communist. None of us
Oh
think
no,
you're a
I know you
communist.
guys think that. Well, the first time I was on, they all thought I was. But I think everybody kind of got used to knowing that's not true.
The other part of their brain engaged and they actually
Yeah, exactly. They spoke to you.
like the beauty of this country compared to anywhere else in the world is like, is that we are all different. We all came from different parts, yet we all believe in the similar view of what what the founders believed in, independence, equality, self-determination, and we did it with different groups of people as opposed to England is England, they have a same shared history, same nationality, and France, and we're the only country where we're not all the same tribe, essentially. That's one of the beauties of the country. And
But Alan, see, we like to say that, but deep into the 1960s and I would say even 70s, that was definitely not true for Black Americans.
I agree with that point. I 100% agree with that point. What I'm saying is that that part of our history is a huge warp on what America could have been if the founders at the time had the fortitude to just say, yeah, everyone's, let's get rid of this slavery thing, which they didn't have the fortitude to do. They didn't have it. But they set the Constitution up in order to have that day when they could actually 100% say all men are created equal. That's the huge. But the country wouldn't have come together if they didn't, because it goes back to, it's about the votes. It wouldn't have happened. I mean, that's just my opinion based off, my interpretation, and history is just what we interpret it to be. But
I hate to give it the
no worries. I went off on a tangent.
No, you're fine. I just have to give the final 2-minute warning because I got to hop off here and jump on another call. But it's been great, guys. And hopefully we'll see you Monday.
All right, Chris, we're trying. We're all trying.
Yeah.
I think we ran Vinny off today. I think Vinny got mad.
No, I don't think so.
I think
he might have, but
I think it'll be
everybody else. Everybody else is raising their hands and following the rules, and it's just not right that one person is getting away with that. And so, I had to make a decision, and he butts in every time, and he just seems to raise his hand.
Yeah,
everybody else does it.
That was just my observation, but thank you guys. It's been great.
See you Monday.
Bye.
Take care, guys.